And we are live. Welcome to Tonight in America. I'm your host, Don Terry Jones, and we have an exciting show today for you. It is midday. It is 12:33 p.m. on this Friday evening. A little bit of a change of scenery. Me moving around from different time slots to start to show up or whatever. I need to really be more consistent with a actual good time slot. So today we're talking about the Supreme Court's ruling against Trump's tariffs, and we're talking about the negotiations of the nuclear deal between Iran and the United States. Two main stories that we're covering today. Nothing else really going on right now. I'm contemplating I'll probably be live tomorrow to cover the Fulton County stuff, maybe, or if some more updates come out of the Iran stuff, because right now we have an update that happened today that they have warned the embassy right in Jerusalem to prepare to possibly evacuate to get out of Dodge, which is not a good sign at all. That basically kind of tells everyone right there it's possible military action is going to be taken very soon. We don't know how soon. Could be any day now, quite frankly, because the peace talks, well, not the peace talks, the nuclear talks that happened the other day, we didn't really get anywhere. We're going to go over it, though. We're going to talk a little bit more about it, but we're going to jump right into the the ruling against the Supreme Court against the tariffs. So this is from the New York Times. So here's the latest. A Supreme Court decision on Friday, not this Friday, it was a previous one, striking down President Trump's sweeping global tariffs, dealt a major blow to his economic agenda and brought his uncertainty to global markets struggling to adapt to his whipsawing trade-in policies that was compounded when he announced that he was imposing a new across-the-board 10% tariff. The court, in a 6-3 decision written by Chief Justice John J. Roberts Jr., ruled that Mr. Trump had exceeded his authority when he imposed tariffs on nearly every U.S. trading partner last year. The ruling prompted a defiant response from the president. In a news conference at the White House, Mr. Trump excervated the justices who had ruled against him as fools and lapdogs and foreshadowed the new tariffs he announced within hours to begin on Tuesday. The court's ruling threw into doubt a series of trade deals with countries around the world that the administration struck in recent months, and left unclear whether U.S. companies or consumers would be able to reclaim some of the more than $200 billion in fees the federal government has collected since the start of last year. So this ruling pretty much is like up towards, like, I believe trillions, right now. Let me see, because I have an article right here. Well, it's in billions. It's like over 175 million. We'll get to that article later. It's like over 175 million in like fees that the federal government supposed to have to pay back to a bunch of these small businesses that were affected by the tariffs. But the bigger question is, like, how would that be implemented? Like, how would that work? How would that look like in practice? But we'll go over that more later. The court's ruling through into, okay, let's see, was over 200 billions in fees the federal government has collected since the start of last year. Justice Brett M. Kavanaugh warned in a dissent that any refund process could be a substantial mess. Well, I just mentioned that just a second ago. The ruling also appeared to create $1 trillion hole in the federal budget because the tariffs that were upended had helped fill the gap caused by his income tax cut. Trump was the first president to claim that the 1977 IEEPA emergency statute, which does not mention the word tariffs, allow him to unilaterally impose the duties without congressional approval. Writing for the majority, Chief Justice Roberts said that statute did not. The court's ruling, backed by justices from across the ideological spectrum, was a rare and significant example of the Supreme Court pushing back on Mr. Trump's agenda. A small but vocal group of Republicans in Congress joined Democrats in celebrating the court's ruling, reflecting frustration that their branch of government has ceded its authority over trade matters to the White House. Senator Mitch McConnell, the Kentucky Republican and former longtime party leader, said the ruling left no room for doubt that Mr. Trump's circumventing of Congress was illegal. Yeah, this didn't sit well on Trump right now when it comes to this invalidation of his tariffs. So let's go back over exactly when did this all start. So we're gonna go back to Liberation Day. We're gonna go back to when Trump implemented these tariffs, and like announced that when he gave the big announcement of like all these countries that were receiving these tariffs against, they wasn't just IEEPA tariffs. There were other like there was another act too as well. Okay, what was the other one? I believe. Let's see. All right. Besides the IEEPA, there was another way that Trump was able to implement his tariffs too as well. Those tariffs, unfortunately, will not be affected at all by this court ruling. Only the IEEPA tariffs that Trump implemented are going to be the ones that are going to be affected. So let's see. Let's see. We're going to go over that later. Let's just go ahead and jump into this right here.
Impose a 25% tariff on all foreign-made automobiles.
Let me leave that at an auto. Yeah, I think I left.
Starting tomorrow, the United States will implement reciprocal tariffs on other nations. It's been a long time since we even thought of that. We used to think about it a lot. We didn't think about it for many decades, and you see what's happened. For nations that treat us badly, we will calculate the combined rate of all their tariffs, non-monetary barriers, and other forms of cheating. And because we are being very kind, we're kind people, very kind. You're not so kind when you get ripped off with your salaries. My auto worker friends and my Teamster friends and all of the unions that typically voted Democrat, they're not voting Democrat anymore because worker, whether union or non-worker, they're for the Republicans now. That's what happened. But we will charge them approximately half of what they are and have been charging us. If you look at that, China, first row, China, 67%. That's tariffs charged to the USA, including currency manipulation and trade barriers. So 67%, I think you can, for the most part, see it. Those with good eyes, with bad eyes. We didn't want to bring, it's very windy.
As you see right here, the tariffs charged to the USA. Trump reciprocal tariffs right over here on the right. That are the ones in yellow. You have the ones right over here, tariffs charged to the USA. These are like in the, I guess that what you would say is like baby blue to the left and white, obviously. And all the tariffs that the United States that are using are called reciprocal tariffs. They're over here in the yellow. So this was a big deal when Trump announced this. This met a lot of scrutiny, a lot of like negative reactions to this. Many people were not in favor of this. Many people were not in favor of the tariffs. I, on the other hand, from a personal perspective, 100% agree with the tariffs. I think it's a great idea to bring people to the negotiating table so that way they do better dealings with the USA and to be fairly fair to us when it comes to trade deals. So I'm not in favor of countries taking advantage of the USA. I'm in favor of countries doing the bit of the USA and to better help us grow as a country instead of us helping strictly helping them grow. If they're taking advantage of us to help advance their countries, but at the same time why we suffer in the process, then why not tariff them? Why not tax their imported goods? That's the big question. So I'm in favor of the tariffs before they got ruled, before they got pretty much invalidated by the Supreme Court. And now basically Trump has to go a different route when it comes to implementing these tariffs now, which we will talk about that later about how he's going to do that.
Out here, we didn't want to bring out the big charts because it had no chance of standing. Fortunately, we came armed with a little smaller chart. So 67%, so we're going to be charging a discounted reciprocal tariff of 34%. I think, in other words, they charge us, we charge them less. So how can anybody be upset? They will be, because we never charge anybody anything. But now we're going to charge. European Union, they're very tough, very, very tough traders. You know, you think of the European Union, very friendly. They rip us off. It's so sad to see. It's so pathetic. 39%, we're going to charge them 20%, so we're charging them essentially half. Vietnam, great negotiators, great people. They like me, I like them. The problem is they charge us 90%. We're going to charge them 46% tariff. Taiwan, where they took all of our computer chips and semiconductors. We used to be the king, right? We were everything. We had all of it. Now we have almost none of it, except the biggest company is coming in. We're going to end up with almost 40%. Lee Zeldin's working to get their approvals. And it's an amazing company. Mr. Wei, of one of the great companies of the world, actually. They're coming in from Taiwan, and they're going to build one of the biggest plants in the world, maybe the biggest for that. But 64%, we're going to charge them 32%. Japan, very, very tough. Great people. And again, I don't blame the people for doing it. I think they're very smart in doing it. I blame the people that sat right in that Oval Office, right over there, right behind the Resolute desk, or whichever desk they chose. Japan, 46%. They would charge us 46%, and much higher for certain items like cars, you know, little items like cars. 46%, we're charging them 24%. India, very, very tough, very, very tough. The Prime Minister just left, and he's a great friend of mine, but I said, you're a friend of mine, but you're not treating us right. They charge us 52%. You have to understand, we charge them almost nothing for years and years and decades, and it was only 7 years ago when I came in, we started with China in charge, and we took in hundreds of billions of dollars from China in tariffs, and they understood, honestly. President Xi understood. He said, look, I understand, and the other countries, and they all understand. We're going to have to go through a little tough love, maybe, but they all understand. They're ripping us off, and they understand.
As you can see right here, these are, you can see closer right now, China, 67%. The reciprocal tariffs we put on them, 34%. European Union, 39%. United States, back to them, 20%. Vietnam, bruh, 90% from Vietnam is insane. But we put back on them 46%. Taiwan, 64%. Put back on them by us, 32%. As you can see right here, all the tariffs right here that on the left right here, they implemented against us. Now we're firing right back at them. When you look at this right now on paper, how could you really argue against that, say this is a bad idea? You know, these countries are taking advantage of us. Why not do it back to them? Why not? We are the global superpower of the world. Our currency is the global reserve currency. We are the top dog in the world right now. We should want our country to be better. We should want our country to have better, fairer trade deals with other countries instead of countries manipulating the trade deals, so that way they can advance their country while simultaneously also doing harm to the United States by also not being fair when it comes to trades. So looking at this right now, when he first announced this, 100% was supportive of this. This was a great idea. On paper, it was an amazing idea. Many people didn't agree with this. I understand, good for reason. We had a lot of economists say this would it be a bad thing in a short run, but over time, yes, we would have seen the results that we were looking for. So it's basically about it's like we're going to suffer in the short term, but in the long run, we're going to come out of it very stronger from it. It's just people weren't thinking about it in long term. They were just thinking about like in short term struggles and short term hardsmanship.
Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe. He was a fantastic man. He was unfortunately taken from us, assassination. But I went to him and I said, Shinzo, we have to do something. A trade is not fair. He said, I know that. I know that. And he was a great gentleman.
Let's go over here. Let's go over here and get CBS's reaction at the time when these tariffs were implemented.
This worst offenders group, as the administration calls, or not, there will be a 10% tariff. And of course, it's notable, I think, that he's making this announcement after the closing bell. We have been reporting for so many weeks, Maurice, about how the uncertainty of this has already rattled the stock market and certainly consumer confidence. So as we take all of this in, it'll be critical to watch the response, not only here, but globally.
Okay, Regent Zhang at the White House, you are absolutely right. It is a big bet. And joining me now is Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady. Kelly, we're getting reaction in after-hours trading. It's key to note that he did this after the markets closed at 4 o'clock. So what's the reaction you're seeing, and what are people going to have to deal with going forward?
Yeah, Weeja was very, very right to note that. So I was just looking at a couple of the companies that really rely on that global supply chain. So they are relying on countries like China and Taiwan. NVIDIA, right? Big AI stock. That's one of them. They get all their chips from Taiwan. So when you've got a 32% tariff being charged there, that is why the stock is down. Apple also, where do we get our iPhones from? China. Big tariff on that. And so that's why.
As you can see right now, we just don't make anything, bro. Everything we get is imported. We don't make nothing. We rarely make anything. Like one of the most common things that I know for sure that we make, that we make in America, that many people seem to, a lot of people are wearing more commonly, is like Trump's "Make America Great Again" hat. That's the one that came to my mind, that I know for sure that in America that you can see, like, that's good manufacturing, good, good cotton, good everything. Trump's hats are made in America. That's one of the few things that we have that are actually made in America. All the other stuff that we get, majority of everything we get, is imported. It's made overseas. We don't make anything. Our weaponries, we get the material from China. We don't make the stuff. We don't make none of that. We don't use the material made in the USA to basically design our weaponries, like our tanks, warships. We don't get the material that's made in America. We get that shit shipped over here from China. Okay, we rarely make anything. We don't make anything, quite frankly, at all. Like, the stuff that we do make, it's just completely just like it's worthless. Like, everything is shipped from overseas. I think like right now, if I have to put it like on numbers, I think like almost like close to like I would say 60%, probably even higher than that. 60%. I bought a low ball on it. It's probably 60 to 70%, 80% probably of like all stuff that we enjoy in the United States is imported from overseas. So we don't really make nothing.
Why you're seeing the after-hours trading go down. 3 takeaways that I want to give you. One is how investors are going to react going forward, because maybe this is just a little blip we're seeing in after-hours trading. Maybe. But uncertainty has been the word of this quarter, along with tariffs. And so we haven't heard from the president in his speech today that this is the end. He has sort of teased in the past, maybe pharmaceuticals, lumber. I think you might see more investor skittishness if there's uncertainty. Yes, exactly. Also, you have companies that are probably going to have to invest billions of dollars in manufacturing here in the U.S. For investors, that's not a short-term good thing for the bottom line. There's undeniable benefits long-term, a global supply chain being here, more American jobs, but investors are worried about the short term. You also mentioned consumers.
The everyday person looking at this, oh my gosh,
exactly. What's
the
going
numbers
on
being thrown around all over the place.
Right.
What's it mean to everyday people?
Well, one, it's going to likely scare people, right? And we've already seen that in some of the consumer sentiment data that we've talked about, that people have cited.
All right, so let's break this down more from a political analysis perspective. So Liberation Day tariffs. So let's go through the Wikipedia part. United States President Donald Trump announced a broad package of import duties on April 2nd, 2025, a date he called Liberation Day. In a White House Rose Garden ceremony, Trump signed Executive Order 14257 regulating imports with a reciprocal tariff to rectify trade practices that contribute to large and persistent annual United States goods trade deficits. This order declared a national emergency over the United States trade defect and invoked the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEEPA, to authorize sweeping tariffs on foreign imports. Executive Order 14257 raised tariffs on nearly all countries to 10%, beginning April 5th, with higher rates for major trading partners scheduling to begin April 9th. The Trump administration called the tariffs reciprocal, asserting they mirrored and counteracted trade barriers faced by U.S. exports. Trade analysts rejected this characterization, noting that the tariffs often exceeded those imposed by foreign countries and included countries with which the U.S. had a trade surplus. Economists argued that a formula used to calculate the reciprocal tariffs was overly simplistic, with little relation to trade barriers. Trump also signed Executive Order 14256, further amendment to duties addressing the synthetic opioid supply chain in the People's Republic of China as applied to low-value imports, which closed the United States de minimis exemption for imports from China and further escalated the China-United States trade war. The Liberation Day tariff announcement led to the 2025 stock market crash. So, yeah, it was a big thing at the time. So when he announced these tariffs being implemented, the stock market had crashed the same day. Because, you know, a lot of the stockbrokers were not too happy about these tariffs at all, because like they look at this because like a lot of these big wig companies, a lot of these stockers, a lot of these entrepreneur types, you know, they have a lot of investments in these companies that feed off of like cheap labor for pennies on the dollar for a bunch of like, you know, like imported H-1B immigrants from other countries. They obviously don't even give a shit about the American people at all. So why the fuck should we give a shit about their fucking their stock market taking a little hit? Like, these people don't care about the common people at all. So in response, the White House suspended April 9th tariff increases to allow time for negotiation. By July 31st, Trump had announced deals with just 8 trading partners: the UK, Vietnam, the Philippines, Indonesia, Japan, South Korea, the EU, and a truce expiring April 12 with China. He ordered countries specific reciprocal tariffs to resume on August 7, 2025. On May 28, 2025, the United States Court of International Trade ruled in a lawsuit that Trump had overstepped his authority in imposing tariffs under the IEEPA and ordered that the liberation tariffs be vacated. The ruling was upheld by the Federal Circuit Court of Appeals on August 29th. The Trump administration appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, which in February 2026, in the case of Learning Resources, Inc. v. Trump, affirmed the decision of the appeals court that Trump's use of emergency powers to enact the tariffs was not legal. So how they was able to determine that was because, like, for some, it was like, because like in the IEEPA, it doesn't specifically say tariff. That's how they were able to like determine like the tariffs that he implemented under the IEEPA was illegal. So that's how the Supreme Court was able to rule. That's how some viewed he was able to rule it, of course. And then others was like basically saying that he didn't really necessarily have the authority for Congress to do so under the IEPA. So that's how also they were able to like basically kind of like avoid these tariffs. So, all right. So let's go ahead and see if there's anything else I need to go over right here before we go on to another. All right, so we're gonna go try to skim through some of this right here. So in a memo signed February 13th, 2025, Trump directed his staff to research both monetary and non-monetary trade barriers imposed by foreign countries against U.S. exports to develop custom reciprocal tariffs to counter and penalize each one. He instructed them to consider factors such as existing tariffs, exchange rates, and trade balances in their analysis. Lutnick said his team would have a plan ready by April 1st, 2025. Trump announced that he would unveil the reciprocal tariffs on April 2nd, 2025, a day he referred to as Liberation Day. Reuters reported that Trump administration struggled to design reciprocal tariffs because each of the 186 members of the World Customs Organization applied different duties. The administration initially considered dividing all countries into tiers of high, medium, and low trade barriers. Later, Treasury Secretary Scott Bassett, who was also not very too happy about the Supreme Court's ruling, he's been very vocal about this right now. Appearances on like Fox News, you know, he's basically expressed that like, yeah, the Supreme Court is trying to hinder Trump from doing what he needs to do in order to better serve the United States. Excuse me, I can't get my words out. Yeah, so Scott Basson's not very happy about the Supreme Court's ruling. They feel like they're undermining the president. They feel like they're going against the people. They feel like they're going against the administration by ruling against the tariffs. And National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett told Fox Business that the administration would focus on the United States' larger trading partners and assign each individualized tariff rates. Hassett stated that more than 100 countries don't really have any tariffs on us and don't have any non-tariff barriers, and that only 10 to 15 countries were concerned. So let's go over the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. What does it really say in the act? Okay, so International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEEPA, Title II of Pub L 95 to 223, 91 Stat 1626, enacted December 28, 1977, is a United States federal law authorizing the president to regulate international commerce after declaring a national emergency in response to any unusual and extraordinary threat to the United States, which has its source in whole or a substantial part outside the United States. The act was signed by President Jimmy Carter on December 28, 1977. So it's the United States Code. The IEEPA is Title 50, 1701 to 1707. The IEEPA authorizes the president to declare the existence of an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security, foreign policy, or economy of the United States that originates in whole or a substantial part outside the United States. So this can mean anything on any terms right now, basically. So because it was this ambiguous and stuff like that, that's how Trump was first able to implement it. But then also because the Supreme Court took time to read over the IEEPA, they've come to a determination that it doesn't specifically authorize the president to implement the tariffs the way that he did. That's basically how is he's able to sum it up for people if they don't really understand the economics like that to a higher degree. But that's how, because the language was so ambiguous and it doesn't necessarily say tariff when you read the title. It doesn't really say that in the code at all. So that's how the Supreme Court was able to rule against Trump in this regard and able to invalidate these tariffs. And pretty much that's how they were able to overturn it. So let's go over down here because I know there's a section about with current. So let's go to current. Okay, so let's go right in here. This has been the times when the IEEPA has been used. It's been used in 1979, region Iran, 1994 worldwide, 1995 against Iran, 1995 Middle East, 1995 Colombia, 1997 Sudan. As you can see, it just goes on and on and on. And we go down right over. Okay, right here. It starts right here, 2025. So Canada, 14,193. Sustained influx of illicit opioids and other drugs at the Canadian border. Impose 25% tariffs on all imported goods except 10% on energy products. Now we'll go over to Mexico, 2025, Mexico, 14,194, sustained influx of migrants and illicit opiates and other drugs at the Mexico border. Impose 25% tariffs on all imported goods. China, 14,195, sustained influx of illicit opiates and other drugs from China. Imposed 20% tariffs on all imported goods. Worldwide, 14,203, investigations of U.S. and Israeli personnel by the International Criminal Court, blocks property of ICC representatives and prohibits their entry into the U.S. Worldwide, 14,256, economic policies of U.S. trading partners imposes additional 10% tariff on imported goods with higher rates for particular countries and a number of exceptions. 2026, this was on Venezuela. This was implemented before Maduro was captured. Private claims upon oil revenue exempts Venezuelan oil revenue held in U.S. Treasury accounts from judicial attachment or transfer. 2026, Cuba. We have a lot of problems with Cuba. Policies, practices, and actions of the government imposes additional 10% tariff on imports of products of countries that provide oil to Cuba. So I think we go get over here to like, let's see, because Trump administration. Okay, so let's go over here. So this part right here, President Donald Trump used the IEEPA extensively, so sanctioning more than 3,700 entities and invoking 11 national emergency declarations out of the 13 that he declared overall, relying primarily and exclusively on IEEPA authority during his 2017-21 term. Trump also used or threatened use of its power in unconventional and unprecedented manners, including exclusive actions utilizing powers under the act that prompted legal challenges. So let's go over, scroll down here. Let's see, we can find, okay. See, talks about the 2025. Okay, also in September 2020, Trump used the IEEPA to order removal of social media platforms, TikTok and WeChat from U.S. So as you can see, Trump's not no stranger to using it just this term. He's used it before in his other terms. You can see right here, September 2020, Trump administration sanctioned and imposed visa restrictions on two international criminal court, ICC officials, a prosecutor, over the court's investigation into allegations of war crimes committed by the U.S. and Israel and Afghanistan and the Palestinian territories, respectively. Critics consider the order an effort to intimidate ICC civil servants from proceeding with its investigation, and accused the administration of targeting the two prosecutors, both of African origins, of course. So, look, the ICC is using race as an excuse to sit there and say that you can't implement, that you can't, sanction someone and impose tariffs on them because of their skin color. Come on, man. That's just completely ridiculous. But anyways, it goes on. The U.S. District Court for Southern District of New York granted a preliminary injunction blocking the sanctions in January 2021. Of course, the courts always got a hard on for Trump and try to stop him from doing anything presidential or whatever. There's a history between Trump and the courts. It's very long and heated history. I think pretty much between this administration and between his first administration, he's been dealing with the courts for far more than pretty much I think any president's ever dealt with the courts before. Okay, let's see. So as you can see right here, he implemented the IEEPA to order the removal of social media platforms. I already read that, but I'll go ahead and remind you guys, based on TikTok and WeChat, because of their affiliation with ByteDance and Tencent, which are Chinese respective based parent companies. So, so let's see if it goes over more about the 2025. The apps. Okay. Okay, so it doesn't go over more of the Liberation Day one right here. So we're going to go back to this one right quick. Okay. I love how Wikipedia gives me it gives me the formula of exactly how this was implemented. Okay. The Trump administration later published their trade barrier formula online, which simplified to the same formula, with variable I representing the country, M representing imports of goods from the country, and X representing exports of goods that the country, and formula given by the White House is as follows. It's so funny. They're giving you that basic algebra type of math. They give you that basic algebra math equation to basically explain to you this is how countries are fucking us. Basically, this is exactly how countries are fucking us in this way. All right, so let's go down here, excluded regions. So let's go to excluded regions. Which region got excluded? Okay, so 6 countries were exempted from the reciprocal tariffs. Belarus, Canada, Cuba, Mexico, North Korea, and Russia. The White House said that Canada and Mexico were exempt because Trump previously issued executive orders imposing tariffs of 25% on the two countries for non-USMCA goods if those orders were revoked, the non-USMCA goods from Canada and Mexico would receive a 12% tariff. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said that Russia had been spared the tariffs because America's sanctions on Russia already preclude meaningful trade between the two countries. As Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said it was because the U.S. has no trade with Russia. It's a shame because like we would have cheaper gas if we actually did trade with Russia and like buy their oil. People don't realize this. The reason why oil prices are so high is because Russia is currently still in war with Ukraine. If we actually trade with them, also if we trade with Iran, we would have cheaper gas prices right now. No problem at all. No problem at all. You know, instead of trying to get the oil from Venezuela, I get it. It's very nice and rich oil from Venezuela. But think about it. If we actually had the trade routes also with Russia and with Iran, the gas prices would be extremely cheap right now. We would have cheap gas prices if we actually just go ahead and just do trading deals with Russia and Iran. But again, it's politics. Nothing could just be as simple as just snapping my fingers and saying this could be done. All right, so let's see. All right. So let's go over exactly what did the Supreme Court what was the transcript and what was the Supreme Court actually said. So this is pretty much just kind of like a summarized version because like the entire transcript is like 170 pages long. I didn't pull that up, of course, but I have this instead. This is from the Supreme Court blog. It's a good website. I recommend if you want to like get more of like a condensed version of like a transcript between court rulings of the Supreme Court. I recommend you come to this website right here. So we're gonna go to exactly to what the justices said during the ruling against Trump's tariffs. All right, so we're just gonna skim through it because it's long as hell to read. I'm not gonna read the entire thing, so we're just gonna go through the main points. So the court did not weigh in, however, on whether or how the federal government should provide refunds. Well, hold on. In a major ruling on presidential power, the Supreme Court on Friday struck down the sweeping tariffs that President Donald Trump imposed in a series of executive orders by a vote of 6-3. The justices ruled that the tariffs exceed the powers given to the president by Congress under a 1977 law preventing him the authority to regulate commerce during national emergencies created by foreign threats. The court did not weigh in, however, on whether or how the federal government should provide refunds to the importers who have paid the tariffs, estimated in 2025 at more than $200 billion, bruh. There's no way in hell we're going to be able to really financially be able to pay these people back. And also, by the way, if that's the case, the federal government couldn't do it. It's the local state government officials, the local state judges would have to find some way to be able to implement that and to be able to facilitate that. The federal government cannot be able to afford to pay them back $200 billion right now. Even if, say, they do have it somewhere. How would they implement that? How would that look like? And what type of check would they write these people? How much money would they give them? You have to ask all these type of questions. Exactly how would that look on paper and how would this be implemented? So in a dissenting opinion, Justice Brett Kavanaugh suggested that the federal government may be required to refund billions of dollars to importers who pay the IEEPA tariffs, even though some importers may have already passed on the cost to consumers or others. Moreover, he added, because the IEEPA tariffs have helped facilitate trade deals worth trillions of dollars, including with foreign nations from China to the United Kingdom to Japan, the court's decision could generate uncertainty regarding various trade agreements that could be difficult, Kavanaugh warned. Yeah, so like if we already got them to agree to trade deals already when we implemented these tariffs to where they already came to the negotiating table, and then in good faith they said they would trade better with the United States going forth. So how does that the court ruling is going to kind of like come into conflict with those agreements that we already have established after those tariffs were implemented? So it's kind of like you have to ask questions like, how does that look now that these tariffs now are invalidated and now they're basically illegal? And now, like, what does that mean for the trade deal that we pretty much like orchestrated because of these tariffs? What is that? What happens to those trade deals? We don't know. Like, a lot of this right now is in purgatory. We don't know for certain what is going to happen to any of this stuff right now because the court ruling just happened, and now we have to figure out like how this is going to play out long term. So let's go ahead. The law at the center of the case in the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, known as the IEEPA, which authorizes the president to use the law to deal with any unusual and extraordinary threat which has its source in whole or substantial part outside the United States to the national security, foreign policy, or economy of the United States if the president declares a national emergency with respect to such threat. A separate provision of the law provides that when there is a national emergency, the president may regulate importation or exportation. Key in point, the president can regulate importation and or exportation of property in which any foreign country or a national thereof has any interest. The dispute led to Franny's opinion begun last year when Trump issued a series of executive orders imposing the tariffs. One set of tariffs, known as the trafficking tariffs, targeted products from China, Canada, and Mexico, which Trump says has not done enough to stop the flow of fentanyl into the United States. Another set, known as the reciprocal tariffs, imposed an initial tariff of 10% on imports from almost all countries, and even higher tariffs on products from dozens of countries. Imposing those tariffs, Trump cited large trade defects as an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security and economy of the United States. So let's go ahead and get to some of what's being said by the judges. Let me see. Okay, in cases like this one, Roberts. Okay, so let's go to some of the judges' opinions right here. In a part of the opinion joined by Justice Neil Gorsuch and Justice Amy Coney Barrett, Roberts said that Trump's reliance on IEEPA to impose the tariffs violated the major questions doctrine. The idea that if Congress wants to delegate the power to make decisions of vast economic or political significance, it must do so clearly. In 2023, the court relied on the major questions doctrine to strike down the Biden administration's student loan forgiveness program, which is fucking crazy, bro. You know how many, bro, that is fucking crazy. They don't want to forgive your student loans. That is, bro. And like, look, I don't even like Biden at all. I don't like Biden. I'm not a Dem. Quite frankly, I don't like Biden. I don't like the Biden clan. But you mean to tell me the Supreme Court struck down the student loan forgiveness plan, which would forgive like student loans across the country of like former students that are like in debt right now from having to pay off all these student debt? Bro, are you serious right now? The Supreme Court struck that down. That is insane to me. They really don't give a fuck about you, bro. That is crazy. They don't give a shit about the average American person right now. That is when I read that, that was insane to me that they even did that. In that case, and others like it, Roberts observed. So I can't talk right now. Observed. It might have been possible to read the federal law at issue to give the executive branch the power it claimed. But context, such as the constitutional division of power among the three branches of government and common sense, suggested Congress would not have delegated highly constitutional power through ambiguous language. So again, this is exactly how they were able to strike down the terrorists, because like the IEEPA is not like directly saying the word tariff at all. Nor does it really necessarily give the president the power to implement the tariffs the way that the president did. You know, and this is me coming from me. I'm a right wing. I'm a Republican, whatever as it gets. But again, you have to be fair to the Supreme Court in this stance that they were able to find that the language is not like, it doesn't reflect at all what Trump has said at all during Liberation Day. So that's how they were able to rule against him and to basically invalidate these tariffs. So in cases like this one, Roberts continue, in which President Trump, as you can see, we're right over here if people are not seeing, so right here, in which the Trump administration contends that Congress has delegated to it the core congressional power of the pulse. Of the purse. God damn. My eyes are getting bad. I can't really see. Considerations like context and common sense apply with particular force. Get a little closer. If Congress were to relinquish that weapon to another branch, a reasonable interpreter would expect it to do so clearly. And indeed, Roberts said, when Congress has delegated its tariff powers, it has done so in explicit terms and subject to strict limits, a test that Trump's tariffs failed here. The tariff question is indeed one of economic and political significance, Roberts added, which also suggests caution before interpreting IEEPA to grant the power that the president seeks. Quoting the Trump administration's brief in the Supreme Court, Roberts noted that in the president's view, whether we are a rich nation or a poor one hangs in the balance. These stakes dwarf those of other major cases. So let's go over here. The court's 3 Democratic appointees, Justice Sonia Sotomayor, Eleanor Kagan, and Brown Jackson, joined another part of the Roberts opinion, holding that Trump's tariffs were also not supported by the text of IEEPA as an initial matter. Roberts wrote that IEEPA authorizes the president to investigate, block during the pendency of an investigation, regulate, direct, and compel, nullify, prevent, or prohibit importation or exportation. That list, Roberts stressed, does not include tariffs or duties at all. An absence that is notable in light of significant but specific powers Congress did go to the trouble of naming. It stands to reason, Roberts said, that had Congress intended to convey the distinct and extraordinary power to impose tariffs, it would have done so expressly, as it consistently has in other tariff statutes. The IEEPA's use of words regulate and importation are not enough to give Trump the power to impose tariffs, Roberts concluded. The U.S. Code, Roberts noted, is repulate with statutes granting the executive the authority to regulate someone or something, yet the government cannot identify any statute in which the power to regulate includes the power to tax. So again, it's disappointing right now so far that, yeah, basically it is kind of like, we have to be like, you have to be objective in this matter, that yes, regardless of like how we may personally feel about this, that does basically kind of give like the right to avoid the tariffs according to the Supreme Court, because like the IEEPA does specify that. So it doesn't give you any like specifications about like tariff at all and how the president is able to use tariffs according to the IEEPA, because apparently he can't. That's according to court ruling. He doesn't give him the power to tax right now, or to, it doesn't give him the power to tax. So unfortunately, as the language is disappointing right now, Trump did basically kind of like said he's going to implement the tariffs in another way. Right after this, after the announcement and the ruling by the judges, he said he was going to implement the tariffs in another way it's gonna have less. It's pretty much you're gonna have to like. The other way that he's going to implement the tariffs are pretty much like it's not going to be as effective as like say the IEEPA's way, because these tariffs were able to stick. Those tariffs that now he implemented right after this ruling were, now you're going to have to basically kind of have to vote at some point in Congress to basically uphold these tariffs. So, Indeed, Roberts added, interpreting the word in the regulate. Okay, but where was I at? Roberts observed that Trump's interpretation of the IEEPA would give the president power to unilaterally impose on voluntary. Okay, I think I read that one. Well, I'll go ahead and read it again just in case people might have missed that part. So Roberts observed that Trump's interpretation of IEEPA would give the president power to unilaterally impose unbounded tariffs unconstrained by the significant procedural limitations in other tariff statutes and free to issue a dissonant array of modifications at will, as long as he declares an emergency to determination that Roberts added, courts would not be able to review such an interpretation. Roberts said, would represent a transformative expansion of the president's authority over tariff policy and indeed over the border economy as well. So basically, that's like I said before, this is how they were able to rule against it, because Trump interpreted the tariffs as like it gives him like basically unbound power to basically implement the tariffs, because he can determine like what is an emergency to the to America through like, you know, foreign policy, during the economy, you know, national security level threat. And so how he was able to implement the IEEPA's tariffs on Liberation Day was because he felt like these countries were taking advantage of America and basically stealing from America and not upholding their end to also be fair to the trade deals that we already had with these countries. We feel like Trump felt like these countries were basically profiting far better than we were profiting, and they were just taking advantage of us. According to Roberts, Justice Roberts, this is not the case, and that he cannot actually do that. He cannot implement the tariffs in that way. So, especially not using the IEEPA. So, of course, that's what makes them have to strike it down. So, finally, Roberts concluded by emphasizing that we claim no special competence in matters of economics or foreign affairs. We claim only, as we must, the limited role assigned to us by Article 3 of the Constitution, fulfilling that role. We hold that IEEPA does not authorize the president to impose tariffs. Disappointing as such. So again, it was basically how they were able to basically kind of like non-avoid these tariffs because of the language of the IEEPA. They were able to basically avoid it because of the language, and it's not specifications that it specifies the president can like unboundly just throw out a bunch of tariffs at countries that he felt were a national security threat, foreign policy threat. I had the word in my head. Excuse me. I literally just got up not too long ago. So he felt like the terrorists were. So him implementing the tariffs, he felt like basically it was a threat to national security, it was a threat to domestic policy issues, and then it also was a threat to our economy. That's how Trump was able to announce and implement these tariffs at first, because he felt he had the power to do so when it came to times of emergencies. He would be able to implement the IEEPA to better deal with these types of emergencies that are a threat to the United States. But it doesn't give specifications that he's able to implement tariffs. So that's how they were able to basically not avoid these tariffs. So let's go to Kavanaugh's portion. Kavanaugh acknowledged that the tariffs have generated vigorous policy debates, but such debates, he said, are not for the federal judiciary to resolve. Rather, the judiciary's more limited role is to naturally interpret and apply the law. In Kavanaugh's view, Trump had the authority under IEEPA to impose the tariffs because they are a traditional and common tool to regulate importations. That's according to Justice Kavanaugh. In majority questions doctrine, Kavanaugh argued that did not bar Trump from imposing tariffs. To the contrary, he suggested under the majority questions doctrine, as the court has applied it. This should be a straightforward case in favor of the president. First, he continued the text of IEEPA long-standing historical practice and relevant Supreme Court precedents all indicate that Congress clearly intended in IEEPA to give the president sweeping power to impose tariffs. Moreover, he argued in cases involving foreign affairs, courts ruled the statute as written and did not imply the major questions doctrine as a thumb on the scale against the president. Shout out to Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh's a real patriot. Again, you know, he's making the counter argument that yes, the IEEPA does give the president power to implement the tariffs, you know, because based off the fact that they are a form of taxation, which they are. You know, tariff, if you look at the definition of tariffs, it's a tax on imported goods. And that was Kavanaugh's argument against it. But of course, I mean, because like the ruling was in favor of like that's not exactly what the IEEPA actually says. Unfortunately, Kavanaugh was not able to do much, especially in 63-page dissent. It was not enough to do anything, and then the courts ruled against the tariffs, and now they're not in void. So unfortunately, was not able to do anything. But Kavanaugh's, at the end of the day, Kavanaugh is still a patriot. Brett Kavanaugh is still a patriot. Thomas Lawrence is still a patriot. These types of guys right here, these types of judges are actual patriots for the country and actually want the country to succeed. They want America to actually grow. They want America to be, you know, no pun intended, great again. They want it to be great again. But unfortunately, there's some judges that are right here that, you know, they have their own agenda. But in this case right here, I'm being fairly objective right now, and I say that this court ruling was kind of like, if you read it on paper, it seemed like to me they actually had the right opinion on this. So unfortunately, okay. Although I firmly disagree with the court's hearing today, the decision might not substantially constrain a president's ability to order the tariffs going forward, Kavanaugh wrote, because numerous other federal statutes authorize the president to impose tariffs and might justify most, if not all, of the tariffs at issue in this case, albeit perhaps with a few additional procedural steps that IEEPA as an emergency statute does not require. So that's that. Pretty much there's nothing really else to go off. Like Gorsuch, he just expressed doubts about Barrett's contention outline. You know, that's pretty much it for that one. So let's go ahead over here. So let's get some answers from questions about what is the IEEPA and how can it be used. So what are the current on stacking provisions? 1. Product subject section 232. Semiconductors are not subject to 232 auto parts, MHDVs, parts, copper, aluminum, steel, timber, lumber. IEEPA, China, Canada, Mexico, reciprocal, Brazil, Russian oil. Products subject to section 232 auto parts or MHDVs, parts are not subject to 232 copper, aluminum, steel, timber, lumber. IEEPA, Canada, Mexico, reciprocal, Brazil, Russian oil, and so on and so forth. So let's see. What is important questions in here about the IEEPA they can answer. I think I went over much of this already in the Wikipedia. So I think we're good right here. We don't really need this. Yeah, so we don't need that. Okay. So all the tariffs that are involved with the IEEPA, as of February 24th, 2026, the Supreme Court ruled that the International Emergency Economic Powers Act does not grant authority to impose tariffs, invalidating major measures imposed since April 2025, including a 10% global baseline tariff, 35% fentanyl-related tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and various retaliatory duties on Canada, the EU, Japan, and South Korea. Key IEEPA tariffs invalidated, replaced as of February 24th, 2026. 10% global baseline tariff applied to most imports. Fentanyl-related tariffs included 35% on most Canadian goods, 25% on most Mexican goods, and 10% on Chinese goods. Reciprocal tariffs approximately 15% on specific goods from the EU, Japan, and South Korea, including electronics, vehicle, and machinery. Energy resources tariffs 10% on Canadian energy, crude oil, natural gas, coal, uranium. Other included 25% on Venezuelan oil and other products, plus elimination of de minimis duty-free treatment. What replaced IEEPA tariffs? Section 112 surcharge, a new 10% Section 122 global surcharge replaced IEEPA duties on February 24th, 2026. This is what Trump announced at his press conference right after the Supreme Court's ruling. Section 232 and 301 tariffs on steel, aluminum, and certain Chinese goods remain in effect as today they are authorized by different statutes. Exceptions: USMCA complement goods and specific on the water shipments are exempt from the new surcharge. That's another one that's exempt, so it is not affected by the court ruling at all. Okay, so this is from ABC News.
Total number of tariffs that have been collected, but that is a really significant number, and now we'll have to see what happens to all that money that the Trump administration.
I'm gonna get up and turn my air on right quick, so I'll let this play. Wait till it comes on. I'm gonna get up and turn my air on right quick.
The Trump administration has been touting as revenue for the federal government.
And I want to bring in Chief White House Correspondent Mary Bruce on this, too, because, Mary, what does this mean for the White House now? Not only was this a centerpiece of President Trump's economic agenda, but he also touted all these deals that he negotiated using these tariffs as leverage. So what now?
Yeah, he used these tariffs as really the main pressure point and leverage, as you say, to negotiate a host of economic deals and also, other foreign policy. Everything from touting that these tariffs helped him to negotiate peace deals to lowering prescription drug costs. What now happens to all of these deals and policies that have come about because of these tariffs as a point of leverage is a huge question going forward. So is, as Elizabeth was just mentioning, what of the question of refunds? The president has often touted that his tariffs are bringing in billions of dollars to the U.S. Treasury. How will that money be returned? What will that look like? This is a massive, devastating, and consequential blow for this administration. It's also a rare rebuke of Trump by the Supreme Court, something that we haven't really seen so far much in this second term. Now, we haven't heard any response from the president, but he himself has described this as the most important and consequential decision ever made by the Supreme Court. Just yesterday, the president quite frustrated in saying that he'd been waiting for this decision. And again, he was adamant in speaking to reporters just yesterday that he has the right to do this as president. But the court today clearly disagreeing, saying only Congress has the authority to impose these kinds of tariffs. Now, the White House has suggested that they could find workarounds to these tariffs, but there is no question that this really kneecaps this administration and much of what they've been trying to do, both economically and abroad.
And I want to bring in our Chief Washington correspondent, too. John, the timing's interesting here. Just a few days before the State of the Union, when the president will address the nation with the justices there, front and center, basically. What do you make of that timing?
Look, extraordinary, and it will be an extraordinary moment in the House chamber as the president delivers that State of the Union address with the justices. They don't usually all go, but there will almost certainly be some of the justices in attendance. You can imagine that the president will likely directly look at them as he addresses this issue. He's been warning for months that if the Supreme Court struck down his tariffs, that it would have devastating consequences for the country, not just economic consequences, but also consequences for U.S. foreign policy. This president has seen tariffs as an instrument that goes far beyond economics, as a way to pressure countries to do what he wants them to do. One extraordinary example, tariffs were imposed on Brazil, a country that the United States actually has a trade surplus with, and Trump, through his statements on social media, suggested it was because he didn't like the way Brazil was dealing with its former president, Trump's ally, Bolsonaro. Interesting reasoning for tariffs. What the decision makes clear is that in the view of a sizable majority of this Supreme Court, that the president does not have the authority to impose tariffs unilaterally unless he has explicit authorization from Congress to do so. He did not have explicit authorization in the vast majority of the tariffs that he has imposed, and they have now struck it down. He is going to be very angry about it, and I suspect we will see that anger manifested in the Supreme Court. I'm sorry, in the State of the Union address on Tuesday.
John, given how quick he has been to use tariffs in various negotiations with various countries, as you point out, what are his options now?
Well, he has options to go through and work under existing authorities. This does not knock down all of his tariffs that are imposed for specific national security issues. The steel and aluminum tariffs, for instance, still remain in force. So he may try to use those existing authorities to reimpose some of the tariffs that are just now knocked down, but he's not going to be able to do it for all of them. It's going to be a complicated process. And one thing you cannot do to a Supreme Court decision is appeal it. This Supreme Court decision is final.
All right, John, thank you. And let's bring in ABC News legal analyst, former Trump administration official Sarah Isgur. Sarah, what stands out to you about the way the justices made this ruling and how this came down?
Big picture, we're seeing Chief Justice John Roberts navigate the Supreme Court through treacherous times, partisan times, where both parties are trying to pull the court into their food fights. And we saw during the Biden administration when the court struck down their student loan debt forgiveness, executive action. This is very similar in terms of the reasoning of the court, saying you can't go back to an old, vague statute that Congress passed decades ago and pour into it new, big executive power. If you want to have your policy agenda, you need to work through Congress to do it. The court is simply not going to be refereeing these fights. Work it out with Congress, compromise with the other side to get legislation passed. And really, by shrinking the presidency, you can see the Supreme Court under Chief Justice Roberts trying to get itself out of these big partisan fights and make the two other branches actually hash this out moving forward. And again, we see this court not as a 6-3 conservative court, but as a 6-3 court with conservatives in dissent. Once again, last term, it was actually split. Of the 6-3 cases that were closely divided with 5-4 included, half of those were 6-3 with only liberals in dissent, and half of those were 6-3 with only conservatives in dissent. So clearly that trend is continuing as well.
So, Devin, if the tariffs are illegal, what's the court saying about refunds?
Question, Diane, the $142 billion question. The Supreme Court's majority didn't say much about it. But Justice Brett Kavanaugh, in one of the dissenting opinions, declared that this is going to be one big mess in his view. There is some precedent several decades ago of the government having to issue some limited refunds of this kind of tariffs to importers in an entirely different case and context. But nothing has ever been seen on this scale in the United States government. And we have heard on the record from Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent in recent months that this is going to be a very complicated, slow, drawn-out process. But I'm already hearing, Diane, from the coalition of small businesses that brought this case, many of them Republican-owned, they feel that these have been illegal taxes and they want their money back. And some of those claimants, Diane, include big American businesses. Costco, tops among them, already filed suit recently seeking those refunds. We'll have to see what the government says today about how that process will begin.
Elizabeth, how are the markets reacting?
Oh, Diane, initially saw a tick up in markets. We see the Dow now up 180 points. You can actually look at that chart and see that we were negative to open today when this decision from the Supreme Court came out. Stocks did trade higher, and now we're up about almost 200 points on the Dow. Look, the market wanted this decision. The investors have not liked these new costs on companies that they pay when they import products. Anytime we've gotten news that effectively rolls back tariffs, we have seen a positive reaction in markets. Though there are ways to put tariffs in place. There are other laws that allow them to do more targeted tariffs on industries. We've already seen them do that with Section 232, for example, on steel. Very likely we will see the administration come out with some of those other plans. They've been hinting at that. Treasury officials we've talked to are already preparing to find other ways to put tariffs in place. So it doesn't mean that the tariff threat is completely gone here for businesses, Diane.
And Devin, Justices Thomas Kavanaugh and Alito all dissented here. What is this decision saying about the court itself?
Yeah, it's really interesting, Diane. I mean, this is a 6-justice conservative majority. 3 of the justices were handpicked by Donald Trump himself. And as we've been reporting over the past few.
All right. So let's expound a little bit more on that right now about this exclusive Supreme Court tariff ruling makes over $175 billion in U.S. revenue subject to refunds. Let's spend a little bit more on that. This is from Reuters. More than $175 billion in U.S. tariff collections are subject to potential refunds after the U.S. Supreme Court on Friday struck down President Donald Trump's broad emergency tariffs. Penn Wharton, budget model economist, said their estimate produced at Reuters request was derived from a ground-up forecasting model that uses tariff rates by product and country for specific duties imposed by Trump, including those under the National Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEEPA, said a senior economist for Penn Wharton budget model, PWBM, a nonpartisan fiscal research group at the University of Pennsylvania. Supreme Court handed Trump a stinging 6-3 defeat by ruling he overstepped his authority by using IEEPA, a sanctions law, to impose tariffs on imported goods. The justices sent the case back to the Court of International Trade to sort out next steps, a process expected to set off a scramble of companies to demand refunds. The Supreme Court did not talk explicitly about $175 billion in tariffs that could potentially be refunded. On the other hand, the ruling today clearly does open the door for those refunds to be demanded. PWBM Director Kent Smithers told Reuters. All right, so let's see. Now we're going to go to Al Jazeera. New U.S. tariff starts at 10%. Trump works to hike. So new 10% tariffs. We're going to spend a little bit more on that earlier when I mentioned that he has, right after the court ruling, now he's implemented new tariffs under one of the other statutes. So let's go ahead and get into it. So new 10% tariffs on imported goods announced by U.S. President Donald Trump came into effect days after the country's Supreme Court struck down most of its previous tariff regime. Washington imposed an additional tariff from Tuesday of 10% on all goods that covered by exemptions, a notice issued by U.S. Customs and Border Protection said. Trump has doubled down on imposing tariffs on trading partners since the top court on Friday struck down many of his sweeping and often arbitrary duties in a rebuke. Again, the word can come out. Rebuke of his signature economic policy. Reacting to the court's ruling, the U.S. president initially announced a new temporarily global tariff of 10%, but later said on Friday he would increase that level to 15%, a move added to confusion surrounding U.S. trade policies with no explanation offered for why the lower rate had been used. An unnamed White House official told Reuters news agency Trump had no change of heart in his desire for a 50% tariff under Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974, but offered no details on the timing for that increase. So that was the new ruling right there for Trump when it comes to these tariffs right now. So that's how he was able to implement a new set of tariffs. And now those new tariffs are set to take, I believe now they've already taken effect. I believe so. I'm gonna have to fact check that right quick, but they've taken effect now. He's offered a new way of implementing those tariffs now, since now that the Supreme Court shot down his original way of implementing those tariffs through the IEEPA. Now that that's been null and void, Trump now has decided, you know what, I'm going to implement the tariffs in another way now. So that's that on that. As more updates come out as time goes on, we will probably update this right now. Now we're going to move on to the Iran stuff. So let's go ahead and get into Iran right now. Let's see. I know I have a video right now before we get into that. So let's go. Let's look at AI Telly right now. And let's get into the U.S.'s possible strategy, which is kind of been confirmed by some anonymous sources from that have talked to some news outlets right now that have reported this is the U.S. strategy to basically, crippled or basically, cut off the head of the Iranian regime right now, that's currently in power in the Middle East.
Prepares to strike Iran, but their traditional Middle Eastern allies say no. If key nations like Qatar
put this up a little bit.
Qatar and Saudi Arabia deny permission for military.
All right, so, and then we're going to get over everything right now. Then we're going to go start from the beginning of how all this came to be. We're not going to go all the way back to the Iranian Revolution, of course. We're not going to go all the way back. But we're going to start pretty much to current issues about how did it currently get this bad right now with Iran, and why this is just not going to get any better, and it's just ultimately going to lead to war.
What happens if the U.S. prepares to strike Iran, but their traditional Middle Eastern allies say no? If key nations like Qatar and Saudi Arabia deny permission for military action from their soil due to political constraints, the U.S. has to activate its second strategy. This means bypassing the immediate region for staging the attack and instead launching from the perimeter using European bases. However, distance is the ultimate enemy in aerial warfare, which completely rewrites the tactical playbook. But just how many bases does the U.S. actually have in the Middle East to begin with? The U.S. footprint is massive. There are roughly 30 to 40 military installations scattered across the Middle East, hosting around 30,000 to 40,000 troops.
And if you're just joining right now we're covering the coverage of Iran in the U.S. trade talks right now. Now watch a video by AI Telly to go over the U.S.'s strategy for how they will want to cripple the regime. Basically just chop their heads off and just pretty much put an end to them or whatever. This is the strategy right now the U.S. has pretty much been discussing. This is confirmed from some military experts anonymously talking to the press.
This This includes massive hubs like Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar and naval support activity in Bahrain and Al Dhafra in the UAE. Losing access to the sprawling localized network for a strike on Iran is a logistical nightmare, which is exactly why the European backup plan is necessary. If they are denied these local bases, what is this latest strategy they pull out of their sleeves? The core of the new strategy is a massive logistics shift, heavily relying on the deployment of an armada of flying gas stations. The U.S. will employ a coordinated deployment of dozens of KC-135 Stratotanker air-to-air refueling aircraft. These are moving from the continental United States and the UK directly into bases in Greece such as Suda Bay and Bulgaria. Why are these KC-135 tankers considered the lifeblood of this operation? Because without them, the operation simply cannot happen. Striking Iran from European bases like those in Cyprus, Greece, or Bulgaria means aircraft must cross immense distances. Fighter jets like F-35s or F-16s simply do not have the internal fuel capacity for a multi-thousand-mile round trip. The KC-135 tankers act as a floating bridge. They rendezvous with the strike packages mid-air to top off their tanks, allowing them to penetrate Iranian airspace, drop their payloads, and make it back to Europe safely. If the tankers don't fly, the strike jets are grounded. So how does the U.S. Navy factor into this massive geographic shift in strategy? To supplement the loss of Middle Eastern land bases, the Navy brings its floating cities into play. For instance, the Gerald R. Ford carrier strike group, currently positioned off Gibraltar, would push rapidly eastward. By reaching the eastern Mediterranean shortly, it creates a crushing strategic pincer. These new carrier can launch at least 4 jets per minute and uses electromagnetic aircraft launch system. A sequence of electromagnets along the track is energized with precise timing controlled by digital software. These magnets create a moving magnetic field that smoothly pulls and pushes the shuttle, accelerating the aircraft according to a programmed acceleration curve. Once the aircraft reaches takeoff speed, about 155 miles per hour or around 240 kilometers per hour, then the shuttle releases it, and the aircraft lifts off. The shuttle then slows down electromagnetically and returns to its starting position, ready for the next launch. You might wonder why the Navy chose this costly upgrade over the tried and true steam catapults. The answer is simple. Electromagnetic takeoff provides smoother acceleration, significantly reducing stress and wear on aircraft frames compared to the harsh forces of steam catapults. Well, apart from aircraft carrier, the U.S. also needs a monstrous amount of missile terminal air defense system. The U.S. had actually removed 60% of its missile defense systems from Qatar and the Middle East. So how many missiles are being transported from different parts of the world to fix this? The answer is fill the sky with these Globemasters. The U.S. military needs a massive airlift of roughly 4 to 6 Patriot batteries and components for a THAAD battery. This involves over 300 heavy transport flights. But here's the detail most people miss. The U.S. needs a flood of aging Patriot missiles to be pulled from stockpiles in Germany and Japan. Why move old missiles? Because they are the perfect cheap solution for Iran's thousands of Shahed drones. Commanders are hoarding the brand new Scarce PAC-3 kinetic interceptors for the hypersonic and ballistic missile threats. The military is clearing out the Cold War inventory to save the modern tech for the big one. But the Navy destroyers will be the first one to strike. The attack begins not with manned aircraft, but with robotic precision from the sea. The goal is simple: blind the enemy's eyes, their radars, and silence their voice, their command and control. In the Persian Gulf and the Northern Arabian Sea, Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, ships like the USS Thomas Hudner, receive the launch order. The vertical launch system cells hiss open, and moments later, dozens of Tomahawk land attack missiles erupt from the decks. These missiles fly at subsonic speeds, humming the terrain in what we call nap-of-the-earth flight to stay below the radar horizon. They are programmed to loiter and strike simultaneously. Their warheads slam into S-300 and S-400 radar sites and command bunkers. They degrade the integrated air defense system, effectively carving out safe corridors for the pilots who are minutes behind them. While the Tomahawks are still impacting, the silver bullets of the U.S. Air Force are already deep inside hostile airspace. These are the B-2 Spirit stealth bombers. But wait, the Iranian also have an attack strategy. First and perhaps most famous is the Swarm. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy operates hundreds of small, fast attack craft armed with heavy machine guns, rockets, and anti-ship missiles. The tactic here is simple, but deadly. Instead of trying to fight a U.S. destroyer one-on-one, which they would lose, they deploy dozens of small boats simultaneously from every direction. The goal is to overwhelm the U.S. ship's defensive systems, like the phalanx, by presenting more targets than the ship can track and destroy at once. Moving to Tactic 2, mining the Strait. Next, we have the silent killer, mining the Strait of Hormuz. This is the world's most critical oil choke point. Iran maintains an inventory of thousands of naval mines, including smart mines that can listen for the specific acoustic signatures of enemy ships. In a conflict, Iran could use submarines, small boats, or even disguised civilian vessels to drop mines right into the shipping lanes. The goal here isn't just military, it's economic. This would deny the U.S. Navy safe passage and immediately spike global oil prices, inflicting massive economic pain on the U.S. and its allies. Here comes Tactic 3, the kill zone. Third is the geographic advantage, coastal missile batteries. The Iranian coastline is mountainous and rugged, perfect cover for mobile missile launchers. The regime also employs shoot and scoot tactics using truck-mounted cruise and ballistic missiles. They fire a missile and immediately move to a new hiding spot before the U.S. can strike back. This effectively turns the Gulf into a kill zone, where U.S. ships are under constant threat of fire from land with nowhere to hide. Tactic 4, we have the ambush threat, midget submarines. Pose a significant threat to U.S. aircraft carriers. The The Gowder-class submarines, which are difficult to detect due to their small size and low acoustic signature, could position themselves in strategic locations near key naval choke points, such as the Strait of Hormuz. By waiting in ambush near expected carrier movements, Gowder-class submarines could fire a coordinated torpedo strike, targeting the hull and propulsion systems of U.S. carriers. A successful torpedo strike on an aircraft carrier could disable its flight deck operations, significantly reducing the U.S. Navy's ability to project air power in the region. Additionally, these submarines could lay underwater mines in critical sea lanes, forcing U.S. warships into predetermined ambush zones where Iranian missile and drone attacks could follow up. Tactic 5. We can't ignore the aerial threat. This is drone warfare. Iran has invested heavily in becoming a drone superpower in the Middle East, in a conflict that would use UAVs not just for surveillance, but as loitering munitions, essentially suicide drones. The tactic is to launch them in massive waves to crash into the sensitive radar dishes and flight decks of U.S. ships. The goal is to blind the fleet's sensors and halt flight operations, leaving the ships vulnerable to missile attacks. Let's look at Tactic 6. The U.S. fleet relies on ports in Bahrain and air cover from bases in Qatar to sustain the fight. Iran possesses the largest ballistic missile arsenal in the Middle East. Their strategy includes massive missile barrages targeting these static headquarters and logistical hubs. The goal isn't just to destroy buildings, but to deny the U.S. Navy the fuel, ammo, and command support it needs to stay in the fight. If the ships have nowhere to dock, they can't stay in the Gulf. But if the Iranian disable the Navy carrier, can the U.S. still fight back? The answer is yes. Focusing only on the slow-moving ships is a mistake. The United States holds an ace up its sleeve that doesn't need to wait for a clear shipping lane. Even without a carrier strike group, the U.S. can deliver precision strikes for weeks to come. This is the domain of Air Force Global Strike Command. They can deploy the Big 3 strategic bombers anywhere in the world in just 24 hours. First, you have the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber. This is the door kicker. It is the only aircraft in history capable of taking off in Missouri, flying nonstop to Iran, penetrating the most advanced air defense networks undetected, and dropping massive bunker busters.
As you can see right here, warfare is very, it's not as evolved compared to what it used to be. Ground forces are non and void anymore. So it's more of sky warfare, sea warfare. It's more of that's the modern day warfare for you. We're not in the times anymore where we're having to send troops on the ground to, well, not yet. We're not at the point yet where we have to send our troops on the ground as of yet. It's getting to that point right now, but the key point that you want to actually keep in mind, to execute a regime change, which the administration has been floating around since June of last year when it came to the 12-day war. They've been floating around the term regime change. And then you have a bunch of these Iranian refugees that have fled the country to come here to America, have been encouraging, the president to go there and participate in the regime change war. And the code words they're using is they're not calling it a war, they're calling it kinetic strikes. Let's be real for a moment. Military experts have told Trump for weeks, and this is the reason why this is another reason why Trump has been so hesitant about actually going to wars, because he's been told by countless generals that this is not going to be a one and done thing. This is not going to be like the Venezuela thing where we go in and we get Maduro, we get out, and we don't have casualties from outside. This is going to be a long, drag out war. This is not going to be a one and done thing. This is going to be a fight. This is going to be a war. Okay? People have to keep that in mind. This is going to be a war. This is not going to be just a one and done thing or whatever. We go there, we bomb them, and then that's it. No, this is gonna further lead to further and further escalation. And then we have troops that are stationed in the Middle East that are also going to be affected too. That are also going to be subjected to be attacked. Israel's going to let itself up be attacked too as well. Regardless if you may not give a fuck or not, that's besides the point. The point of the matter is many military experts have told Trump, this is just not going to be just go in there, we wipe out Iran and we leave. No, we are going to be drawn into a longer conflict if we go there and try to execute regime change, because we can't just kinetically strike them. We don't even know where the Ayatollah is even at right now. We don't know where his location is at. Marco Rubio, I read this from an article. I forgot, was it Foreign Policy? I believe it was Foreign Policy, The Economist, I believe, where he was basically, ranting about why is the Ayatollah not directly being involved in these talks? Why is he refusing to actually join in on the talks at all? And probably because people are trying to kill him. They're trying to execute him so that way they just pretty much cut off the head of Iran, and then hopefully then they get what they want. They get the regime change. But here's another key point that many of them are missing. You killed the Ayatollah, you killed his regime, you crippled them. What's stopping something from far worse from coming into power, and then we actually get the regime that we're supposed to be, we're accusing this current regime of being. We actually get an Islamist, extreme jihadist regime that actually don't care about upholding treaty, upholding the nuclear proliferation agreement. Instead, what they want to do is they will go as far to create a actual bomb, and then they use it against either us or our troops in the Middle East. So you got to keep in mind right now, it's like we take out this regime, what's stopping something far worse from coming into power? But just gonna be completely honest. What's stopping something far worse from coming into power? They keep telling you exactly that it's not going to happen, and that Reza Pahlavi, the son of the Shah, will go there and be put into power because some of the Iranian people want him to be placed into power. Yeah, what about the ones that don't? They keep going off of like this. They keep going off the propaganda from a bunch of like paid actors that were there in Iran that are possibly CIA or Mossad, sitting there advocating for the Shah's son to be put into power, even though technically speaking, now the Iranian people want him to be there. They don't want him to be in power. When the protests were happening, there were no reports about the counter protests, the pro-regime protests that was also simultaneously taking place. Because it's not newsworthy. It's not narrative worthy. Let's not even talk about the mention of the fact that the reported numbers about how many protesters were actually killed. We don't know that. We don't actually have concrete numbers. The regime reported that's like around 7,000, I believe. And then you have some of these activist groups that are reporting and saying that it's far higher than what the regime is reporting, like 13,000, probably 20,000. Trump said it was like 30,000. That's unverifiable numbers. So most of it's unverifiable. Most of it we can't really fact check or whatever, because like the regime has cut off Starlink, which was, funny enough, Starlink was given to Mossad. So when Mossad infiltrated the country, they were able to access the internet source, which is Starlink, in the country, so that way they can document the protest and show people what was going on the other side. Instead, we have also reports about people that were in black that apparently looked like they were not supposed to be there and looked like they were moving differently during the protest, as in they were doing something that seems like they were encouraging the people of Iran to protest even more, to where the regime had to come and crack down on them even harder, just so it can look like the regime is, just so they can just like make their regime appear to be just this tyrannical, evil regime that they were. And I'm not saying the Iranian regime is good at all. That's not even what I'm arguing. What I'm arguing is that this is made to just push us in the realm of going to war with them. That's what I'm saying. All this is just pushing us towards the war with Iran. That's all it is doing. They want us to go to war with Iran. For what reason? It's because Israel wants greater Israel. We're going to talk more about that later. But right now, let's finish Telly's video, and then we're going to start from the beginning. Not from the absolute beginning of the Islamic Revolution. No, we're going to start from the JCPOA. When Trump came in and ripped up the agreement that we had with them already, the nuclear agreement that we already originally had with them, Trump came in and ripped it up, and now it's led to a ripple effect, pretty much of what we're dealing with right now.
Deep underground facilities. Second, the B-1B Lancer, known as the Bone. This supersonic heavy hitter carries the largest payload of any U.S. bomber. It can dash in at high speed and low altitude to deliver massive barrages of cruise missiles or satellite-guided bombs to clear the path. And finally, the B-52 Stratofortress. It may look old, but do not underestimate it. It acts as a flying missile truck, capable of launching long-range cruise missiles from hundreds of miles away, while outside the reach of Iranian air defenses. Let's take a look at how this works. The first line attack involves the B-2 stealth bomber moving in to destroy high-value air defense systems like the famous S-400 Triumph and other surface-to-air missiles, effectively disabling them by using its stealth technology. Next, the B-1 Lancer flies at a very low altitude towards enemy targets to take out older anti-aircraft guns and missiles. This clears the way for conventional aircraft like the B-52 Stratofortress, which can then sweep in to destroy any critical infrastructure without facing anti-aircraft threats. This is the reason they need both the B-2 stealth bomber and conventional bombers, as there are only 19 units of the B-2 Spirit in service to date. We make original videos from scratch, so please do subscribe and hit the notification bell for more videos.
All right, shout out to AI Telly. So let's go and start from the beginning right here when it comes to the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. So, like I said, it's also known as the Iran nuclear deal. Iran deal was an agreement to limit Iranian nuclear program in return for sanctions relief and other provisions. The agreement was finalized in Vienna on 14 July 2015 between Iran and P5+1, the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, UNSC, China, France, Russia, the UK, US, plus Germany, together with the European Union. Formal negotiations begun with the adoption of the Joint Plan of Action, an interim agreement signed between Iran and the P5+1 countries in November 2013. Iran and the P5+1 countries engaged in negotiations for the following 20 months, and in April 2015 agreed on an Iran nuclear deal framework, which led to JCPOA, along with roadmap agreement between Iran and the International Atomic Energy Agency. Under JCPOA, Iran agreed to constrain its nuclear program by limiting fuel cycle activities that could lead to the production of weapons-grade uranium or plutonium. The JCPOA restricted the number and type of centrifuges in operation, the level of uranium enrichment, and the size of Iran's enriched uranium stockpile. Key facilities at Fordo, Natanz, and I guess Iraq were repurposed for civilian uses such as medical and industrial research. Iran agreed to accept more intrusive IAEA monitoring measures of its fuel cycle related activities in exchange for complying with these restrictions. Iran received relief from nuclear related sanctions imposed by the United Nations, the EU, and the United States, but many U.S. sanctions unrelated to the nuclear issue targeting Iran's missile program, support for militia groups, and human rights record remained in place, limiting the economic effect of sanctions relief. The agreement also set a timetable to lift the UN arms embargo contingent on Iran's continued compliance with civilian nuclear commitments. The agreement took effect on 20th January 2016. It was criticized and opposed by Israel, Saudi Arabia, Iranian principalist, and some in the United States. Now, it was really heavily opposed by Israel too as well, at the forefront. I'm glad they included their name first. So Bibi Netanyahu came to Washington. He talked in front of Congress and basically kind of like handed Obama's ass and told Obama, basically just kind of like, just I'll sum it up, and just basically called him, said this was a wrong agreement. We don't need to be letting them like enrich uranium at all. We need to go ahead and take the head, cut the head off the snake right now, and just basically eradicate this Iranian regime right now. And why is it that they're pushing so hard for this? So there's a thing called the Clean Break, the Clean Break Memo. Excuse me, the Clean Break Memo, also known as the Clean Break Report, is a document that was prepared in 1996 by a study group led by Richard Perley for Benjamin Netanyahu, the then Prime Minister of Israel. The report explained a new approach to solving Israel's security problems in the Middle East, with an emphasis on Western values. Keyword, Western values. It has since been criticized for advocating an aggressive new policy, including the removal of Saddam Hussein from power in Iraq and the containment of Syria by engaging in proxy warfare and highlighting its possession of weapons of mass destruction. Sorry, I lost connection right there. What I'm gonna do is I gotta move my desktop from where it's at, because I think in the spot where I have my desktop at, I think when I have my desktop at, I think that's where it's what's causing my internet to always buffer. I'm also gonna buy another router too. I'm gonna buy 2 routers so that way I can help out with more, strengthen my connection more, because I think 1 router is not good enough where I'm at. I think I need 2 routers. So anyways. So I thought, okay, so let's see, trying to see where it includes all the countries on here, because I know Libya was one. All right, so Libya, Lebanon, let's see, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, and I know the only one left right now is Iran. Iran is the only one left that has not been, taken out yet. But that is Israel's ultimate goal, is to go ahead and take out Iran, and that is actually what the clean break is for. The clean break memo is exactly that. It is a paper that basically outlines all the countries that pose a threat to Israel that need to be eradicated, and they need to be basically, we bring about spreading democracy to the Middle East, bring about Western values to the Middle East. That's what we were sold upon when it came to the clean break memo. We were sold to go to these countries and bring about democracy, but instead what we did was we destabilized them, and now they haven't really recovered since then. And look at Syria for a recent example. They've gone through a change right now with the House of Assad taking out of power, and now the Syrian rebels took a power, and now Jelani, who's changed his name, I forgot his name off the top of my head, but I know him as Jelani, has taken power now. But also at the same time now, they've also become a bitch to Israel, because now that Jelani has taken power, and any type of weapons deals to strengthen Syria's weaponries, to strengthen Syria's military capabilities, it's hindered, because every time they would try to make deals that strengthen Syria's military industrial complex, Israel would just attack them immediately, just bombard their military base, bombard any type of agreements with any other country that tries to strengthen Syria's capabilities to basically kind of defend itself. Israel would just bomb it, and basically trying to just remind them that now you are owned and occupied, and pretty much like you're under the thumb of the Israelis now. So that's basically what happened now. So since Jelani took power, now Syria is pretty much just completely crippled, and pretty much like at the whim of Israel. So, but this is the clean break memo of exactly why is it that we're going so hard at pushing for this war, and why BB did not like the JCPOA. So let's go on right here. Let's go back to where we was at. The United States withdrew from the pact in 2018, opposing sanctions under its maximum pressure campaign. In a symbiotic response, members of Iran's Islamic Consultative Assembly burned the text of JCPOA in Iran's Islamic Consultative Assembly. Yeah, it was a crazy video. The sanctions applied to all countries and companies during the business when Iran cut it off from the international financial system, rendering the nuclear deal's economic provisions null on 18th October 2025. In the aftermath of the June 2025 Iran-Israel war, Iran officially announced the termination of the agreement after 10 years. So So that means now Iran's letting the United States know they are going to enrich unless there's an agreement made about how much they can enrich. You know, the United States' talking points is like no bomb whatsoever. Iran's talking points is we are allowed to enrich. We are allowed to enrich uranium for humanitarian purposes. We are not enriching for a bomb, as the United States keeps accusing Iran of doing, which the rhetoric has been the same all the time. We really have no actual reports that says otherwise. Even Tulsi Gabbard, the head of the intelligence department from the GOP, has said the same thing. They're not enriching uranium for the purpose of creating a nuclear weapon. They're not. There's no proof of that. So, but the Trump administration keeps moving the goalposts about what they want changed when it comes to these nuclear talks. They said now it was a nuclear enrichment. Now it was the missile capabilities. Now it says they can enrich, but they can enrich only a certain amount. Now it's this, now it's that. It keeps changing every time they keep having talks. From Ayatollah Khamenei. So it also talk a little bit about the Iran-Israel war that broke off right when we was having pretty much hold on before we go into that one. Let's go about the first round of talks right quick. So let's go back to the 2025 negotiation rounds that happened between the U.S. and Iran. You know, because we've had multiple rounds of negotiations with them that have never really led to anywhere. We just pretty much just like taking up space and just breathing there, and we just step in the same room and we're just yapping, and nothing's really getting done. There's no agreements that have been met yet. They just keep going and keep negotiating, and Trump keeps raising the rhetoric about wanting to go to war. It almost begs the question, well, not even begs the questions, it actually kind of like answers itself pretty much in his rhetoric that he wants the war. They don't want the negotiations. They don't want to negotiate the peace deal. If that's the case, they would have just came to an agreement by now. Iran has made it clear they do not want to enrich a bomb. And I don't want them to have a bomb either. I don't want no country to have a bomb. Not even Israel. And if you think Israel doesn't have a bomb, this is Benjamin Netanyahu being pressed on CNN by Chris Cuomo, pressing Netanyahu on Israel's nuclear capabilities, which everyone knows even to this day, they have nukes. They just do not want to disclose that because that means then they would lose out on the aid that we give them, because that goes against our agreement that we cannot incentivize countries that actually have nuclear capabilities, because that is not agreed, because we cannot give aid to countries that have nukes. That is a well-known statute in the United States federal government that we cannot, and especially according to our foreign policy too, that we cannot trade with countries that have nukes. We cannot give them aid. We cannot give the ones to Russia, China, who have their own interest and are superpowers in their own right, and they have nukes. We do not give them aid in any regard necessary. Israel is supposedly our greatest ally. As our greatest ally, especially you get a lot of aid from us, which is insane already in itself. The fact that you get so much aid and you possibly have nuclear weapons that you do not want to disclose, because that means that if you disclose them, you would literally lose out on the aid that we provide you, because you cannot have nuclear capabilities while the U.S. funds you. That's insane in itself. So let's listen to Bibi pretty much cap about the fact about Israel's nuclear capabilities.
We'll talk about why you think it matters. This is described as an unusually theatrical display for you, and you gave the speech in English. Why give this speech in English and do it in such a big way?
Well, because I wanted the world to hear it, all of it, and there are only a few million Hebrew speakers, and there are a few billion English speakers. So I think that's why, and I did it. Look, I would have done it in other places as well. You know that I spoke before the American Congress when I thought it was an important message. President Macron of France spoke to the American Congress the other day. This is a very important subject which relates to our quest for peace and security in the Middle East and the world. And I thought it was important that the broadest audience possible would hear the dramatic findings that we found about Iran's secret nuclear weapons program.
The suggestion is that you wanted to make sure that President Trump heard it and heard it directly from you. The question is, well, what did you change with this information? As you pointed out, you spoke to different allies. Putin says the deal stands as it is. The UK says they're not naive on what is going on in Iran. Germany says there is landmark and robust monitoring. On the U.S. side, you had Secretary Mattis say that this deal was done in 2015, anticipating that Iran would try to be trying to cheat still. Michael Hayden, whom you know, the former head of the CIA and the NSA, says he didn't learn anything new. Even the U.S. statement from the White House changed from has to had, that Israel has an active nuclear program to had. And it seems to be that the message is, we knew this already.
Caught him.
Well,
caught him red-handed.
Better intelligence on Iran than Israel. And when we got this trove of 100,000 documents, we learned so many things that we didn't know. We're still learning them. You know, we needed to translate it from Farsi, all these documents, all these simulations, all this data, all this testing, everything, all these sites. We've learned an enormous amount about Iran's secret nuclear program. Now, the deal that everybody's talking about was premised on the fact that Iran had no such material. But Iran took enormous pains after the nuclear deal and before, but especially after, to hide this information. It's like an arsenal of knowledge. It's not just in the minds of people who they have. It's the actual calculations that they've done, the blueprints, the measurements. They kept it hidden because they don't want the world to know what I showed yesterday, that they actually have this capability, a pretty advanced capability to manufacture nuclear weapons. Because I think if this was known in 2015, the nuclear deal as was done would not be done. And in fact, a key condition for its implementation was that Iran come clean, and it gave them a clean bill of health, that they have no secret nuclear weapons. So that's not true.
Mr. Prime Minister, how do you reconcile?
They kept it, and they're ready to use it.
So, Mr. Prime Minister, how do you reconcile that notion with what just came out from the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA? Of course, you know, but for the audience, that's the monitoring agency in place to secure the different precepts of the 2015 deal. They say they have no proof that Iran has done anything new. They date it as 2009, that, yes, you're right. This is what Iran was up to.
I'll take it a step further. This is not the first time BB's been doing this. Not since then. When this came out, not since 7 years ago when he's been saying this. He's been saying this a lot longer than that. Let's listen to BB's best hits about Iran's weeks away from building a nuclear weapon. Let's listen to all the best hits.
You probably heard this line before.
Iran has never given up its quest for nuclear weapons and the missiles to deliver them.
That's because Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been saying this for more than 30 years, claiming Iran is close to having
nuclear weapons, atomic bombs.
In 1992, as a
So, like I said before, it's interesting that we're seeing like all BB's greatest hits about Iran is weeks away from building a nuclear weapon, and we still haven't even gotten to that point yet. The IAEA said they're not building a nuclear bomb. Our own intelligence says they're not building a nuclear bomb. We still don't even know where is this information coming from. He has not. If he shared his sources with anybody, of course, the GOP says the GOP probably would know. But again, they're not sharing their sources with the American people. Not with any news agencies. They're not sharing it when they've been asked or when they've been hounded in interviews about this. They're not sharing no information with the American people. So we don't know if they even have proof that Iran's building a nuclear weapon, or they're just assuming, they just want a justification just to go to war.
As a member of parliament, Netanyahu addresses the Knesset. He says, within 3 to 5 years, we can assume that Iran will become autonomous in its ability to develop.
That's 1992 when he said that too.
3 years later, in his book, Fighting Terrorism, he repeats the same time frame, 3 to 5 years.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Fast forward to 2002. Netanyahu testifies before a U.S. congressional committee actively calling for the invasion of Iraq.
Are there any other nations that you would recommend that the United States launch preemptive attacks upon at this point?
The two nations that are vying, competing with each other, who will be the first to achieve nuclear weapons, is Iraq and Iran.
The invasion happens months later. No weapons of mass destruction are found in Iraq. This is a fragment of a 2009 U.S. State Department cable released by WikiLeaks. Netanyahu tells members of Congress that Iran is 1 or 2 years away from being capable of developing nuclear weapons.
They're online.
It's 2012, and Netanyahu is holding up his infamous cartoon bomb at the UN General Assembly.
By next spring, at most, by next summer.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.
So again, like I said before, no nuclear bombs yet, and we're still waiting on like how long is a week to BB? I'm curious to know that how long is a week to BB? Because no nuclear bombs yet, no nothing. We're not even close to them building a bomb yet. If that's the case, they would have already built it by now. I don't know how long is a week according to BB's logic. How long is a week to him? Is a week not actually like a week according to his terms? 5 to 9 months. Like, how long is 5 to 9 months according to BB's logic? Like, it's just like, it's insane to me. Let's go back to this interview.
This may be even what it wants to be up to, but that there is no new proof.
Well, first of all, there's an enormous amount of new information that we didn't know that shows how advanced they were in their bomb-making work. So that's the first thing. Second, if people knew this, then how could they close the file and say they never did anything like this? This was the condition for entering the deal. Third, I think it's crucial to understand that the nuclear deal right now that we're discussing is premised on the assumption that Iran will somehow become a peaceful country. It's not. It's become an empire that is devouring one country after the other, and that they're doing before they have nuclear weapons. This deal will give them unlimited enrichment of uranium, unlimited in a few years. President Trump said yesterday, 7 years, unlimited enrichment of uranium. Second, it doesn't address their ballistic missiles in which they could carry the bombs. And third, as I've just shown, they have the wherewithal, the stored up, preserved knowledge to make a bomb very quickly if they wanted to do it. We could, if you put all these three things together, enrich uranium, bomb, missiles together, that's a prescription for catastrophe.
Right, but it works both ways, right?
It's important for me to put that forward.
But it works both ways, right? Mr. Prime Minister,
if you have a bad deal.
Well, the Secretary of Defense right now, Mattis, said we put this deal together assuming they would try to cheat. So it wasn't done assuming that they would change as a state actor, Iran. Nobody went into it with their eyes closed to that, that reality right now.
No,
you would have no idea what was going on. And how would that make Israel safer? If by all accounts, Iran had slowed or stopped what it was doing prior to the deal, how would you be?
It's funny seeing two Jewish men impress each other about this. It is funny to see that, actually. You know, there's nothing like two chosen ones going against each other right now. It's funny.
Be safer without a deal.
There are many premises that are incorrect in your statement.
Please.
The first is we're better off because we have this deal. No, you're not. Because this deal, the fact that you have a dangerous deal, the fact that Iran is keeping or not violating a dangerous deal doesn't make it less dangerous. It's completely flawed. It's based on lies. It's based on the fact that they hid the nuclear weapons program and knowledge that they stored up. They didn't come clean with it. And it's also based on the fact that Iran will somehow be a docile neighbor. That's not what's happening. The opposite has happened. I said from the start, look, if you want peace, if you want security, you should oppose that deal as structured. I said that. I said that Iran is not going to be more pacific, more moderate once you sign the deal. And it's exactly what has happened. Iran has done the very opposite. It's taken in the money, the billions, and it's using it to conquer Yemen, to fire rockets on Saudi Arabia, to colonize Syria militarily, to arm Hezbollah with the most dangerous missiles on earth, to call for Israel's annihilation, to spread its totalitarian wings throughout the Middle East, and to oppress its people inside Iran to boot. So the whole premise that this deal somehow guarantees a safer, more moderate Iran is wrong. This deal paves Iran's path to a nuclear arsenal. If you got rid of it, the first thing that would happen is you would crash Iran's money machine, in which it's pursuing its dreams of a conquest and empire. They're funding it with billions, tens of billions of dollars, their aggression throughout the region. And this deal facilitates it. If you take away the deal, they're going to be in a huge economic problem. Second thing, I think you have to...
They already are in a huge economic problem already, as it is right now. Currently speaking, because of that, because Trump came in and ripped up the deal. And when I hear Trump say that he cares about the Iranian people, the protesters not being killed or whatever, that's fine. But like, if you really care about the Iranian people, me personally speaking, I have no dog in the fight. But if you want to care about the Iranian people, you rip up, you take the sanctions off of them. Let them actually participate in like trades that can like strengthen their economy, so that way people wouldn't have to keep rioting. You wanna quell the problem already as it is. Well, you gotta do, you gotta lift, you gotta take your boot from off their necks. You have their boots on their necks so much, and then the people are feeling this right now. But of course, we know why that they're not gonna lift the sanctions is because they want the war to happen. They want justification. They want the regime overthrown. They try to go about this in different routes. One route is having the people overthrow the regime. How do you do that? Economic hardship, which leads to anger, hostility, unsettledness. This leads to an uprising. And you know what happens with uprisings? We saw that in 1979 when they overthrew the Shah. They want that to be repeated, but this time for this current regime to bring about their secular democratic society that they had before with the Shah. Even though technically speaking, even if this regime was overthrown by the people, who's to say the people wants the Shah back in power? All of them, at least. That's a real good question.
Insist that you actually dismantle the components that allow Iran to produce an arsenal of nuclear weapons. If you don't, and you do nothing, then I predict that what you'll do is head right into a wall. You'll head into a terrible conflict and perhaps a terrible war in which Iran would be armed with nuclear weapons. That's bad. If you want peace.
Well, it sounds like you're suggesting that that's the only course anyway. The way you outline the threat and the intentions of Iran, it seems as though you are indicating that you are on the precipice of war with this nation, because that's the only way that you'd be able to guarantee that you smash all of their capabilities and stop all of their evil outreach in the surrounding region, as you describe it. Is that what you mean? Are you prepared to go to war against Iran?
Well, nobody's seeking that kind of development. Iran.
That's a lie. Because of last year's war, that is a lie. They want war. No other choice, but they want it. The Israelis act like they didn't want war with Iran, and then they attacked them during a negotiation between us and Iran about their nuclear enrichment, about their nuclear enrichment program. And then we had knowledge that they were going to attack Iran, and we let it happen anyways. And there was a recent report, really, from Politico, where Trump was basically like giving out, basically kind of, he feels more comfortable. This is I'm not even joking when I say this. This is from an anonymous source that works in the White House. Trump feels more comfortable if Israel was to do that again. Here's why. He needs justification to go to war, but he does not have the backing of the American people. Even some of his most trusted, loyalists, some of his most dick-riding fans of them all, of course. I love Trump. Again, I'm not a MAGA tart, but I love him when he does something right, and I can criticize him when he does something wrong. But the point of the matter is, let me finish my point. The point of the matter is, some of his most loyal dick riders would sit there and even says this is a bad thing to go to war with Iran. It's not, how's that really about America first? So instead, what they're doing is trying to, tug the line of the non-Jewish MAGA supporters by trying to basically convince them, saying that, look, our greatest enemy is being attacked. They are being attacked, even though he's comfortable with them attacking Iran first, which technically there will be Iran defending itself. He's looking for justification so that we can draw the sympathy of the common voter in to support them going to war with Iran. Because you see a couple of these these leftists, a lot of these progressive leftist types, probably the moderate Democrats, I believe, I've seen on TikTok saying that why don't the Trump administration go in and save these people? Osmond Gold was saying the same thing. Why do they not go in and cripple or cut the head off the snake and eliminate this regime right now and save the Iranian people from the suffrage and hardship that this current regime is causing its people, not realizing that the reason why they're rioting is because they have economic hardship that come from crippling sanctions that were implemented by Trump himself, who came in and ripped up the nuclear enrichment, the nuclear deal that we already had with Iran, that was orchestrated by Obama, because Trump says they shouldn't be allowed to enrich at all. Okay, so any country can enrich uranium. If it's not for the purpose of creating a bomb, of course, they can enrich uranium because uranium can be used for multiple things besides making a bomb, especially for humanitarian purposes and for medical purposes. It could be used. So Trump's reasoning for is that he just he believes in the propaganda. It's not only that he believes in the propaganda, he's probably paid to actually go out and push his talking points that Iran is building a bomb, even though we still don't even have actual proof of them actually building a bomb. We just have rhetoric. Rhetoric is not enough to convince the American people they're building a bomb. Maybe it might convince maybe convince the OEVs. Maybe it might convince them, but it's not convincing the average voter that we need to go there and execute regime change or save the Iranian people, whatever. Because quite frankly, I hear some of these, some of the other right wingers that sit up here and says, oh, the poor people of Iran, the regime is so harsh and so cruel to its people, whatever. I'm like, brother, the only reason why these people are going out there and rioting against the regime anyways, and then not to mention these people wanted that regime. They rioted and overthrew the Shah, and they wanted an Islamist regime, an Islamist theocracy. So It's not that I quite frankly don't really feel as bad, quite frankly, because that's what the people wanted. And the only reason why they're going at the regime is the way they are is because they have crippling sanctions on them. That's the reason why. Besides that, they would have fucking just not even go out and riot at all. Quite frankly, they wouldn't. So if Trump really wants to help Iran, help the Iranian people, take the sanctions take your boot off their neck. Get rid of the sanctions. That's it. Because I'm tired of being in the Middle East. China is our literal mortal enemy that we should be focusing towards. Not worrying about what's going on in the Middle East and worrying about what's going on pertaining to Israel and them wanting to push towards greater Israel. Honestly speaking, if I don't have it, Israel would be small as possible. Unfortunately or not. Because we have politicians that are bought and paid for by lobbying groups that only serve the interests of foreign countries and not the American people.
Iran is the one that's changing the rules in the region. Iran is the one that is practicing aggression against every country in the Middle East. Iran is firing rockets into the capitals of neighboring countries, and Iran is preparing 150,000 rockets to be fired in Israel with the explicit goal of annihilating us. Iran is also moving its army. That's its declared purpose, right next to the Golan Heights, right next to Israel. So Iran is obviously on a campaign of aggression. I've learned something from history, and I think you have too. When you have an aggressive tyrannical regime with a murderous ideology, stop it at the beginning. Don't let that tyranny grow and expand. Don't let that aggression conquer more and more territories. Right. So yes, you have to take a stand. We take a stand. I think that's the way to prevent war. If history has taught us anything, it's that opposing such tyrannies and their aggression early on actually prevents catastrophe. And if you don't, you invite catastrophe.
So obviously how you do that is going to be an open question, and it has very lethal implications. That's something that we'll have to see how it develops. The idea of disclosure. Iran won't tell the truth. We had to go in there, is Israel's position, and steal this information so we can know the truth. Disclosure as an issue should work every way. The United States should say what it has. You know where I'm going with this. A yes/no question for you. Does Israel have nuclear capabilities and nuclear weapons? Yes or no?
We've always said that we won't be the first to introduce it, so we haven't introduced it.
But that's not an answer to the question. Do you have them or do you not?
Any country. It's as good an answer as you're going to get. But I'll tell you one thing, Chris, and I think it's important. Iran signed the NPT. Iran signed all sorts of commitments. Iran said that they don't have this nuclear weapons program. And Iran calls daily for the annihilation of my country.
Absolutely.
We don't do that.
We understand that there's an existential threat from Iran and others. We understand that Iran is known for lying on this issue. That's one of the big motivating factors for the deal in 2015, as it was explained to us. But what I'm saying is, if disclosure matters so much, what message does it send when you won't confirm something that is widely believed by the entire international community? How does that inspire the spirit of disclosure?
I said that it's not the spirit of disclosure. It's a commitment, a specific written commitment by Iran as part of the deal to disclose what it has. Iran undertook that specific commitment.
I understand, but you know what their take on it is that you won't even confirm that you have nuclear weapons when the world already believes that you do. Why? Why keep that quiet?
Well, you can make all your assumptions. One thing is clear. Israel is not threatening the annihilation of any country. And it's interesting that the nuclear arms race that I predicted would unfold once this deal was signed, because everybody knew that they were just kicking the can forward for a few years, and as time passes, Iran will get a nuclear arsenal. So now you hear other countries in the region saying, we want nuclear weapons too, or rather, we want unlimited.
That is also a talking point too, is like, if Iran gets a nuclear bomb, everyone in the Middle East is going to want one. Saudi Arabia is going to want one. Turkey's going to want one. Qatar is going to want one. Everyone's going to want a nuclear bomb at that point. And I get that point, but it's like, you have one too as well, BB. You guys have one too as well. You shouldn't even have a nuclear bomb, and you stole the material to get it from us. You should not have a bomb.
Enrichment, nuclear enrichment of uranium, the way Iran gave it. If Iran has it, why shouldn't we have it? So in fact, what this thing is doing, nobody.
That is, bro. That's funny to hear him say that.
He said that about Israel. You may think about Israel what you want for decades. Nobody cared. But as soon as they understood that this regime in Tehran, this murderous terrorist regime that wants to conquer all the Middle East and is sending its terrorist tentacles throughout the world, the minute they understood that it has a clear path to a nuclear arsenal, everybody now in the Middle East is trying to get their hands on nuclear weapons. Not a good idea. If you want peace, the crucial thing is don't let Iran get a clear path to the bomb. That's what that deal does. And I think if you want to assure the peace and security of the Middle East and the world, you can't let that happen.
Listen, you make a lot of strong points about that. Obviously, less is the only direction to go with nuclear capabilities, not more. And your points about the risk that Iran poses in the region, let alone with its nuclear capabilities, are well known and echoed by many of your allies. My point was just that if what we want is for people to come clean about things, everybody should be open and honest, and it will create a different kind of pressure on what kind of dialogue is expected. But your points are well taken, Mr. Prime Minister. It's good to have you on the show, Benjamin Netanyahu. Thank you very much for taking the opportunity.
Thank you for having me.
A lot of it sounds like he's projecting a lot. So let's go ahead to the first rounds right here. This is when the negotiations started happening right here. And let's see, I know one. So Steve Witkoff, who's a real estate mogul, should not be doing the negotiations at all. He's been one of the leading negotiators right now. Then Jared Kushner has joined back on to also join Witkoff, who's also not really like an expertise in this field or whatever. They're talking with the financial minister, the foreign minister, Abbas Arachi, about this, who's actually an expert, actually is knowledgeable in this field about negotiations when it comes to like deals. You know, they've been negotiating this since last year, 2025, to now 2026, and we still don't even have a deal yet. So now we're going to go through the timeline of all the rounds of talks and basically how this is pretty much leading us nowhere. The first round was held on April 12, 2025 in Muscat, Oman. The talks were led by U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Arachi. Each delegation was in separate rooms with messages relayed through Omani mediators. The discussions were discussed as constructive. Afterwards, leaders of both negotiating teams spoke briefly in person. An Iranian news outlet reported that during the talks in Oman, Iran proposed a three-step plan to reach a deal with the United States. Iran would agree to temporarily lower its uranium enrichment to 3.67% in return for access to frozen financial assets in the United States and authorization to export its oil. Iran would permanently halt high-level uranium enrichment, restore inspections by the UN nuclear watchdog IAEA, and commit to implementing the additional protocol allow for surprise inspections at undeclared sites. These steps would be taken if the United States lifts further sanctions and persuades Britain, Germany, and France not to trigger the snapback of UN sanctions against Iran. So this right here, exactly what Iran really wants to focus on right here was the sanctions. They want the sanctions to be lifted. That way their economy can really prosper. So their main goal, besides the nuclear enrichment, is to lift the sanctions. Okay, that is a viable thing to fight for. You know, they've had sanctions on them since this type of political system was put into place by the 1979 Iranian Revolution, and ever since then they've never really had the U.S.'s boot off their necks or all the other European-led countries. You know, they had like something of like a reprieve with Obama when they were able to grow their GDP a little bit. But then Trump came in and just like, you know what, cut that off. Then bam, put them right back into where they're at right now, into where it led to the protest. So 3 U.S. Congress would approve the nuclear agreement, and Washington would lift both primary and secondary sanctions, while Iran would transfer its stockpiles of highly enriched uranium to a third country. Iran has reportedly also proposes the steps to disassociate tensions, including a pledge to disarm and freeze the activities of Hamas, the Houthis, Hezbollah, and Hashid al-Shabi. Shabi. I believe you pronounced that right. Forgive me if I pronounced that wrong. U.S. Envoy Witkoff reportedly welcomed the proposals presented by the Iranian delegation in Muscat, which was unexpected by the Iranian side. My nose is fucking bothering me, shit on me. So, all right. So second round talks of Omani mediated in talks in Roman occurred on April 19th, 2025, 1 week after the initial meeting in Muscat, the capital of Oman. Once again, indirect discussions were led by Arachi and Witkoff, and messages conveyed through Omani Foreign Minister Badr al-Basadi. Afterwards, U.S. President Donald Trump said he was open to meet Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. They have not met yet still, even to this day. Following the second round of talks, the Israeli Air Force reportedly conducted drills simulating an Iranian missile attack on Israeli air bases. They were getting ready to attack Iran. That's what was going on. Meanwhile, Iran was reported to be constructing a large security barrier around 2 underground tunnel capacities linked to its main nuclear facility. Third round of high-level negotiations took place on April 26, 2025, along with the first round of expert-level talks. The high-level talks were described as serious and productive, with both sides aiming for an agreement based on mutual respect. Arachi reported progress, but noted that key differences remained. Trump's special envoy Witkoff aims to finalize the deal within 60 days. That didn't happen. However, he's likely to encounter resistance from Iranian Finance Minister Abbas Arachi due to significant mistrust between the two parties. Another critical issue is Iran's stockpile of highly enriched uranium and its potential destruction, for which the U.S. would agree to lift economic sanctions. While Iran intends to retain its enriched uranium stockpile within its borders, the U.S. insists on transferring it to a third country. Iran recommended Russia. The U.S. recommended itself, I believe. Additionally, Iran seeks guarantees to protect itself in the event that the U.S. withdraws from or violates the agreement. Third round developments. France warned that if no deal was reached on Iran's nuclear program, it was prepared to trigger the snapback mechanisms to restore UN sanctions, to reinstate the UN sanctions that were lifted on the JCPOA. Along with Britain, Germany, France could activate this process before the JCPOA expires in October, which would primarily cut Iran off from key technology investment in European markets, dealing a severe blow to its economy. This already hasn't happened already. That's actually what led to the Rio. I talked about that in a previous episode. That's what happened to the Rio. The Rio took a major dive, and now it's completely essentially worthless. You see how much its value to the U.S. dollar. It's completely and utterly worthless right now. And that's kind of why, it's just and you see why the people are marching in the streets, burning down, small businesses, burning down small businesses, places of, property damage, is going up. It's just destroying vehicles. This is the reason why they went out there and did all they did during the protest, because the Rios is effectively worthless. On May 1st, Defense Secretary Hegseth posted that Iran would pay for supporting the Houthis' attack on the merchant ships in the Red Sea crisis. President Trump warned the secondary sanctions on entities buying any oil and petrochemicals from Iran. Rubio warned to walk away from nuclear enrichment. Arachi canceled the May 4th meeting on technical reason, Trump called for full dismantling of nuclear enrichment. Iran then created a ballistic missile and threatened to hit U.S. bases. Revolutionary Guard General Salami has warned that the IRGC would open hell gates on invaders. That rhetoric has not changed at all. So on May 7th, 2025, ahead of the 2025 visit by Donald Trump to the Middle East, U.S. officials reported that President Donald Trump had declared that the United States federal agencies would refer to the Persian Gulf as the Arabian Gulf, or the Gulf of Arab, not the Gulf of Arab, Saudi Arabia, Arabian Gulf, or the Gulf of Arabia. Had plans to make it difficult during a planned visit to Saudi Arabia later in May. Basically, signifying that it's no longer the Persian Gulf. Saudi Arabia is becoming the new top dog in the Middle East. And Trump, of course, we have very close ties with Saudi Arabia. They're one of our close allies. They're literally our greatest ally. I mean, if you look at a paper, what Saudi Arabia does for us and what we do for them, Saudi Arabia would be our greatest ally, not Israel. But that's another conversation for another day. This plan received outrage and condemnation from Iranians and the Iranian government and could harm the negotiations. Yeah, they didn't take too lightly to that rhetoric. Again, this is Trump poking the bear. The proposed change was opposed by Iranians across the political spectrum who displayed rare unity in rejecting the possible American move. Later that day, however, Trump told reporters that he had yet to make a decision whether to use Arabian Gulf, stating, "I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings," appearing to acknowledge that Iran's fierce opposition to that name. He said he would decide while on his visit, yet no announcement was made. It's not going to happen. So the same day, J.D. Vance said that the deal would allow Iran to rejoin the global economy. So Republican senators, let's get into the Lindsey Graham part right here. Lindsey Graham and Tom Cotton warned the next day that any future U.S.-Iran nuclear agreement would require Senate approval to be durable, and that such approval would only be possible if Iran fully dismantled its enrichment capabilities and addressed its missile and terrorism activities. Basically, they want the Libya model for them. A group of senator Republicans called for the inclusion of a 1-2-3 agreement, which would impose strict safeguards and require full dismantlement before any cooperation. While such agreements regulate peaceful nuclear cooperations, experts noted that applying one to Iran will be highly unusual due to its history of proliferation violations and ongoing IAEA investigations. According to well-informed source, a 1-2-3 agreement was included in the current talks with Iran. So let's go on right here. Fourth round. So fourth round talks were held on May 11 in Oman prior to Trump's visit to Middle East. The talks was a high level only, focusing on broader framework where technical negotiators not participated. Lasted for more than 3 hours, with both sides calling the discussions difficult but constructive and agreeing to continue. According to unnamed Iranian officials, Iran proposed a joint nuclear enrichment project with regional Arab states in U.S. investments as an alternative to dismantling its nuclear program. U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff denied this was discussed. The plan's feasibility remains uncertain given regional tensions and the lack of diplomatic ties between Iran and the U.S. for 45 years. Trump's May 2025 opposed an Iranian response during he's a trip to the Middle East. Like Trump had this his big tour in the Middle East during his 2025. He's going to do that again, obviously this year. But I mean, he's mentioned Iran on every one of his trips to the Middle East during his little escapade, to the point where he's used demonizing rhetoric to demonize Iran, of course, calling Iran the most destructive force in the Middle East, and stated that Iran's leaders had focused on stealing their people's wealth to fund terror and bloodshed, tearing the region down. As that's kind of projecting a little bit, because you did put the crippling sanctions on them. So I mean, Trump is projecting when he says that. All right, let's see. On May 16, Trump sent a nuclear proposal and warned that swift progress was necessary to avoid serious consequences. The Trump administration increasingly demanded that Iran abandon uranium enrichment, making this a central issue. Khamenei rejected the proposal, dismissing the U.S. demand as excessive and outrageous. He accused Trump of lying about seeking peace and declared him unworthy of response. Khamenei also reiterated that Israel is a cancerous tumor that must be uprooted. Based. Same day, Trump urged Iran to move quickly toward a deal. Iran held talks with the European powers in Istanbul about its nuclear negotiations with the U.S. Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi cautioned that reinstated UN sanctions, which had been lifted under the 2015 nuclear agreement that expires in October this year, could lead to irreversible consequences. So fifth round talks held on May 23rd in Rome and ended without a breakthrough, though both sides agreed to continue discussions. U.S. officials described the talks as constructive, but emphasized that significant differences remained. You know, one side's particularly has been, both sides are very harsh and harsh, like 10 toes down on their stances. U.S. says no enrichment. Now they added in like limited like the missile, capabilities. Iran's like no missile capabilities, not for up for discussion. The enrichment, we have a right to enrich. Now, of course, we can go about it in like whichever way is feasible, and we enrich to a certain degree, but we still have the right to enrich. So both sides are very harsh, very like 10 toes down on their stances when it comes to like, how should they go about doing this? Okay, in weeks leading up to a fifth round, tensions between Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu had increased over the U.S. decision to engage in nuclear talks with Iran, which Israel viewed as a serious threat to its security and regional interest. Israel strongly opposed the negotiations, lobbying against the diplomatic efforts and threatening a unilateral military action, which, again, that happening, including potential strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities, a position critics warn could endanger diplomacy and heighten regional tensions. Iran had reportedly strengthened its air defense systems and increased military investments in preparation for a possible U.S. or Israeli attack if negotiations failed. So let's go on down here. Israel's rejection of the U.S. proposal on June 9th. Israel rejected the Trump administration's proposal for a new nuclear deal, but announced plans to present a counteroffer to many mediators. Iran formed. Okay, so yeah. Back here. Okay, called the U.S. proposal unacceptable and not aligned with the ongoing negotiations. Main parts of this discussion include Iran's right to continue domestic uranium enrichment, the handling of its current stockpile of highly enriched uranium, and the conditions for lifting sanctions against Iran. While Trump demanded the full dismantlement of Iran's enrichment program, Iranian leaders insist that enrichment was non-negotiable. Just like the missile stockpile is also non-negotiable. The latest U.S. offer reportedly included assistance in building nuclear power reactors and allowed limited enrichment under a regional consortium facility becomes operational. On June 10th, Trump stated in a Fox News interview that Iran was becoming much more aggressive in negotiations. Friday, the Iranian Defense Minister Asa Nazir Zadeh warned that if negotiations with the U.S. collapse and conflict erupts, Iran would target American bases in the region. He stated that all U.S. bases in nearby countries are within reach. Trump also repeatedly threatened Iran with military action if no deal is reached. So June 12, 2025, IAEA found Iran non-compliant with its nuclear obligations for the first time in 20 years. The IAEA stated that Iran's repeated failures to fully address questions about undeclared nuclear material and activities amounts to non-compliance. As you can see right here, next thing to happen, the 12-day war. So we'll go a little bit over here to the 12-day war, the Iran and Israel war, also known as the 12-day war, was an armed conflict in the Middle East. The war began when Israel bombed military and nuclear facilities in Iran in a surprise attack, assassinated prominent military leaders, nuclear scientists, and politicians, killing civilians, and damaging or destroying air defenses. Iran retaliated with over 550 ballistic missiles and over 1,000 suicide drones, hitting civilian population centers, one hospital, and at least 12 military, energy, and government sites. The United States intercepted Iranian attacks and bombed 3 Iranian nuclear sites on 22nd June. Iran retaliated by firing missiles at the U.S. base in Qatar. On 24th June, Israel and Iran agreed to a ceasefire under U.S. pressure. The war followed a decades-long proxy war. Iran had called for Israel's destruction and armed Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in Lebanon. Furthermore, Iran's nuclear program had caused international concern for over a decade, and Israel considers it an existential threat in 2015 under the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. 6 countries lifted sanctions on Iran, which froze its nuclear program. In 2018, U.S. President Donald Trump, right here from Wikipedia, unilaterally withdrew from the plan. Iran began stockpiling enriched uranium. The largest suspended International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, monitoring. The day before Israel attacked, the IAEA declared Iran non-compliant with its nuclear obligations in a resolution put forward by the United States, United Kingdom, France, and Germany. Excuse me. Following the October 7th attacks in 2023, both Hamas and Hezbollah into open conflict with Israel. Excuse me. In April 2024, Israel bombed Iran's consulate in Damascus, Syria, killing senior Iranian military officials. Direct conflict continued in April and October. So as you can see right here, this is what the results was of that attack. So as we go back over here, so 12-day war, 2026 negotiations. All right. Let's go down to where the first. Okay, as you can see right here. All right, so on February 2026, the United States and Iran held indirect talks in Muscat, Oman, mediated by Oman's foreign minister, Badr bin Ahmed al-Basadi. American officials cast doubt over the effectiveness of the talks, with Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying that I'm not sure you can reach a deal with these guys. And Vice President J.D. Vance expressed frustration over the fact that the supreme leader who runs the country does not participate. I said earlier that it was Marco Rubio that said this. I made a mistake on that. So J.D. Vance said that he was frustrated with the Ayatollah not participating in like the negotiations about the Iranian nuclear deal. So I want to correct that notion. That was J.D. Vance that said that. So, Iranian delegation was led by Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, while the U.S. representative included Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, and SITCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper. These are the talks that were happening during the 2016 negotiations. This was in February, which was recently, this month, of course. Despite some initial false reports about direct talks, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi did not meet face-to-face with any members of the U.S. envoy, and the entire session was mediated by Oman's foreign minister. The discussions focused on Iran's nuclear program and were described externally by Iranian officials as a good start, while at the same time, those leading Friday prayers within Iran dismissed the proposed prospects of diplomacy in their sermons. A message likely coming from the office of Ali Khamenei. Both sides agreed to continue diplomatic engagement despite deep mistrust and disagreements over the agenda. Araghchi noted that further negotiations were agreed upon, though their date and manner were yet to be determined. Okay, let's go over here. Let's see. Araghchi, so second session right here, ahead of the second meeting. Right here, he said that our missiles are not. So again, let's see. Abbas Araghchi stated they are negotiating for a nuclear peace deal, one better than Obama's JCPOA. He said that our missiles are not subject of negotiations and shall not be infringed. All right. Let's see. Trump stated talks for deals will resolve next month very quickly. So the third round of talks was scheduled for February 26th February on nuclear issues in Switzerland. In the midst of this round of negotiations, it was reported that the sides were far from reaching a deal. Anticipating attacks on its oil terminals ahead of a third round, Iranian regime pushed loading onto its tanker fleet 20 billion oil barrel. Excuse me. Hold on one second. Let me check something real quick. Society Commission said they would drag all the countries into the region into war. Okay, so let's see. Ultimatum on 20th February. This was recently. President Trump claimed he gave Iran 10-day into week a deadline to reach a deal, or else they would attack. On the same day, Iranian Minister of Oil and Energy said Iran will possibly sell oil to America if a new nuclear deal is reached. That I mentioned this earlier, bruh. If we could just like literally just lift the sanctions right now and just do a deal with Iran, why we also have the oil deal going on with Venezuela, we could literally have cheaper oil right now. But bro, this is just like I was ranting about when it came to like the student loan forgiveness, but that was implemented by the Biden administration, bro. It's like they just do not want us to win, bro. These corporations do not want, these Jews don't want us to fucking win, man. Let me backtrack. Okay, on 17 February, Ali Khamenei declined to accept the nuclear peace agreement negotiations conditions set out by Trump and said that Trump won't be capable of deposing the Islamic Republic. He added that the United States Navy could be sunk, and he called to restore trust and calm within the regime. Okay, so blah blah blah. Okay, all right. So we got to do that. Now let's go ahead and talk about the recent talks about that happened just the other day. In Iran talks, U.S. brings tough demands, growing military presence. This is from the Wall Street Journal. Geneva, the last round of talks over Iran's nuclear program wrapped up on Thursday without a deal. Both sides still far apart on key issues as the U.S. raised their pressure by presenting tough demands and sending more jets and warships to the region. Even with all those war jets, or even with those war jets and ships, we still don't even have quite enough to really go to war right now. That's another reason why they haven't really gone to war yet. Besides just military experts telling Trump that this is not going to be a one and done thing, we still don't have the necessary capabilities yet in the Middle East because we have them all scattered all over right now. So we still don't have really enough, military capabilities in the Middle East to really just go to war right now. We still, because all of our resources are all scattered all over right now. We still have like a lot in the South America region too as well. So it's not a good idea to go to war, especially right now when we're not even technically ready to go to war. In talks that went into the evening, U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner said Iran must destroy its 3 main nuclear sites at Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan and deliver all of its remaining enriched uranium to the U.S., officials said. They also said any nuclear deal must last forever, not sunset the way restrictions rolled over time under a nuclear pact negotiated under the Obama administration that Republicans have long said was too weak. President Trump pulled out of that deal, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, in his first term, reimposing strict sanctions on Iran. Iran rejected the idea of transferring uranium stockpiles abroad. It also has objected to in the enrichment, dismantling its nuclear facilities and permanent restrictions on its program. Iranian state media, and people familiar with the talk said Oman's foreign minister and a U.S. official said the two sides have made progress and would likely meet again for talks. The Omanian said negotiations at the level of technical experts will continue in Vienna next week. The U.S. demands came after Trump warned in his State of the Union speech Tuesday that Iran continues to pursue a nuclear weapon and ballistic missiles that could hit the U.S., charges Iran denies. So that's reported today. Now let's get that. Where is it? Do I have it? So let's get this is CBS News right here. That's reported on the talks right now that happened just recently yesterday.
Headlines matter. Some more than others. This morning in Politico, America prepares for war. The New York Times. For Trump, military strike in Iran could serve symbolic purpose.
Right, so let's get that out right now.
Matter. Some more than others. This morning in Politico, America.
Like I said, right now, But all these reports right now of like, it's just like both sides are like dead set on like, they're both like dead set on like they one or the other. Like Iran is dead set on like we want to be able to have the right to enrich. We are allowed the right to enrich, and our missiles capabilities are not discussed. United States is like you cannot enrich in all. You must limit your stockpile of missile capabilities too as well. It's like it makes it harder for an agreement to be reached. And then the added pressure of the president, who clearly wants to go to war, it's just not like it makes it even 10 times worse to come to an agreement on anything, quite frankly.
Prepares for war. The New York Times. For Trump, military strike in Iran could serve a symbolic purpose. The Wall Street Journal. In first, U.S. deploys combat jets to Israel for potential wartime mission. The Washington Post. Iran, U.S. resume nuclear negotiations as Trump's war clock ticks down. The Economist.
Sorry, I think I lost connect, bro. I gotta fix this issue when it comes to like losing connection. That's why I rewinded it for you guys. So in case you guys missed it, don't worry. I rewinded it for you guys. They want you to miss I don't want you to miss any minute of this important information.
Schedule, however, appears behind the pace of things. Interestingly, CBS News polling shows 72% of Americans do not think the administration has clearly explained the U.S. position on military action against Iran. 53% told us they oppose war maneuvers to prevent Iran from making nuclear weapons. We are devoting the entire hour of the show to what appears a threshold decision for President Trump. War with Iran, yes or no? Is it about nuclear weapons, ballistic missiles, and support of terrorism in the region? And if so, how can America get its way without coercing regime change? And even then, how can it and our allies be certain of future outcomes? How close is Iran to a nuclear bomb? Could it be placed on a warhead and launched with accuracy? How weak is the theocratic revolutionary regime that has bedeviled America and destabilized the region for decades? Is the Iranian regime on the verge of toppling, needing only a relatively low-risk military push? President Trump said Tuesday Iran's regime has killed 32,000 protesters for the Iranian people. What is their future with or without a regime that reflexively reaches for bloodshed and torment as an answer to dissent? We cannot answer all those questions, but we can try to make some meaningful headway, and we will. So let us begin. We start tonight with our Charlie Daggett, who comes to us from Tel Aviv, monitoring the U.S. military buildup in the region, and MTS Tayeb, who is in London, closely tracking today's negotiations between the United States and Iran and Geneva. Charlie, let's start with you. What do we know? What do you see? What is the feeling there in the region?
Yeah, Major, you just set the stage. And if it sounds like I'm going through what sounds like a shopping list of U.S. military assets in the region, it's exactly that. You mentioned in that lead up the F-22 stealth fighter jets that have arrived here or are on the way to Avda base here in Israel. That's a first, as far as I'm aware, to have the United States' most advanced fighters actually on the soil here. On the way, the USS Gerald R. Ford, that we know has left, from my own contacts, has left the Suda Bay port in Crete on the way to the Eastern Mediterranean. We hear it might even come to Haifa here in Israel. In addition to that, you have the USS Abraham Lincoln. You're talking about 12, 13, 14 guided missiles, destroyers, and cruisers. So we are talking about a lot, much more than would be a deterrent. And when you speak to U.S. officials that are part of the CENTCOM, Central Command area of operations or area of responsibility, this isn't just about the possibility of an attack against Iran, giving the president those options from limited strikes to a prolonged conflict, but this is about troop force protection as well. And that's where you need to have the carriers with squadrons of F-35s and F-18 fighter jets, the interceptors, the Patriots, the THAAD missile defenses. Israel came under attack last year in the 12-day war with Iran. The United States couldn't stop some of those missiles from hitting not far from here, just a couple blocks away, getting through Israel's vaunted Iron Dome system. That's what they're preparing for, and more is on the way, again, by the hour, Major.
MTS, you just heard Charlie describe the hardware. That's a colloquialism for what's going on in the region deployed by the United States. The diplomacy is going on around tables in Geneva. Wrap us up on what we learned about today's conversations.
Well, Major, they are serious, but they are happening against a backdrop of very different assumptions on each side about pressure and, frankly, capitulation. On the surface, this was a consequential round. Long hours, indirect talks mediated by Oman, and now a move towards technical discussions possibly in Vienna. Now, that signals both sides believe there is at least a narrow path to something workable. But underneath that, there is a fundamental mismatch. Washington is still operating, at least in part, on the idea that sustained military and economic pressure should eventually force Iran to fold. Iran, by contrast, at least with the people we've been speaking to, is negotiating from a historical belief that if it does not capitulate under pressure, endurance will improve its leverage. These talks are less about rushing to a deal and more about testing whether the U.S. can really clarify what it actually wants, verification or surrender, and whether Iran believes compromise is safer than resistance. That's why this next phase, if we get to this next phase, is so pivotal. Major.
Setting the table for us tonight brilliantly, Charlie Daggett and MTS Tayeb. I'm grateful to you both. Thank you so much.
All right. So which countries are urging citizens to leave Iran amid U.S. threat of force? A growing number of countries have warned their citizens in Iran to leave amid threat of possible strikes by the United States. The warnings continue this week, come as diplomats and mediators will mount a last-ditch push to diffuse soaring tensions between Washington and Tehran over Iran's nuclear program amid a massive U.S. military buildup in the Middle East. A third round of indirect talks between U.S. and Iranian diplomats is scheduled for Thursday in Geneva. The U.S. president struck a belligerent tone against Iran during his State of the Union speech, accusing Tehran of attempting to rebuild its nuclear program that was hit by U.S. strikes last year, and claiming the country had missiles that could reach the U.S. mainland without providing evidence. But he also said his preference was a diplomatic resolution. Iran has repeatedly emphasized that it would not agree to Washington's demand for zero nuclear enrichment, and considers its missile program a red line that could not be negotiated. In recent weeks, the U.S. military has significantly increased its presence in the Middle East and Mediterranean region, including sending some of its largest aircraft carriers, the U.S. Abraham Lincoln and the USS Gerald Ford. Here is a list of countries that are advising their citizens to leave Iran. Australia is one. Germany, India, Poland, Siberia, South Korea, Sweden, United States. All these countries are advising people to leave either Iran or surrounding areas right now, the Middle East, because like this could just get ugly and they don't want their citizens caught in the middle of the fire. So that's that right now. That's the Iran coverage of the Iran. Greater Israel. We're going to save this. You know what? I actually going to say this for a different episode because I got more footage of to show with you guys about Greater Israel. There was a great little documentary that was posted up about Greater Israel and about why it's important in its historical context. So we're going to say this for like another one. Come back to this again because we're obviously not going to stop talking about this right now. And Greater Israel is a vital part of why they're going after Iran too as well. So we're going to come back to this again. Stay tuned for that. I'll see you guys. I'm contemplating I'll probably come back tomorrow and stream. I'm going to stream Tyler Oliveira's new journalistic piece that he posted of him going to another Jewish enclave that happened in New Jersey, where he's exposing more fraud from the Jewish community. Not surprising. So we're gonna probably look at that tomorrow as well. Do a little reaction stream again. Take a little break from politics. Well, even though technically that is still politics, but it's just like a little fun little reaction stream for you guys. Is that? But yeah, I'll see you guys probably tomorrow on Saturday. If not, I'll see you guys Monday. Have a good rest of your day.